Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto and Fu Were Jinchuriki Criminal Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
A young, blond man, barely older than 24, sat up in his bed and slowly opened his eyes. He surveyed his rather deserted chamber. The dresser was nearly empty, and the walls were naked and blank. His bright orange linens were the only ones that stood out. Even though the color was odd, he simply adored it. The young man approached and took up the little figurine that was the only item on the dresser. On a circle of wood, a stone fox with 9 tails flowing behind it was sitting. The inscription on the bottom read, "For the man who assembled the 9." He set the statue back down after grinning at it, then picked up a shirt from the floor and covered his muscular frame with it because he was just wearing shorts. He heard one of the 2 telephones he kept on his desk ringing as he walked from his bedroom into his living room. He merely purchased the prepaid one in order to avoid being found. "Hello?" he said as he approached and answered the phone. The reply from a man was, "Naruto." That would be the only person who's ever answered this phone. "Yes," the blonde groaned. "All right, fair point. It's Kakashi. Just wanted to give you a little heads up that we're gonna have some guys coming to take you in today," said the man on the other end. "Do I at least have time to grab myself some breakfast?" Naruto asked, his face slightly irritated. Kakashi always laughed when Naruto remarked, "Yeah, you have like half an hour. I'll see you when you get to the precinct." With a, "All right, see you then," Naruto ended the call. He knew he wouldn't have to go without food, at least. From an early age, Yamato had understood what he wanted to do. He had been moved from foster home to foster family as a child and had never known who his parents were. The cops were the ones who had been there to assist, even though not all of them were the most pleasant locations on Earth. He could always summon them to come and assist if the fists began to fly or the bottles began to be thrown. He enrolled in the police academy as soon as he could and advanced through the ranks swiftly. He became a detective before he realized it. He had been pursuing this man for almost 2 years, and here he was at his front door. He was carrying something unsteady, to be sure, but it allowed him to look around the boy's flat and ask him some questions. "Naruto Uzumaki, this is the police. Open the door," he said, knocking on the door of the spacious apartment. The brown-haired man was wearing one of his finer suits and was accompanied by 2 men dressed in police uniforms. "No need to yell, you could have just knocked." "Hello, Detective Yamato," he said, his face bored. Even though he was going crazy inside, Yamato made an effort to appear composed. "Hello, Mr. Uzumaki. We have a warrant to search the premises." "You didn't have to get a warrant. The lovely officers of the Konoha Police Department are always welcome in my home. Can I get you something to drink?" Naruto gestured for everyone to enter. "No thank you. We'll also be needing you to come down to the precinct and answer a few questions for us," Yamato said, amazed at how composed and kind he was. Pretending to be uninformed, Naruto said, "Not a problem, I don't really have much to do today. May I ask what all this is about though?" "There's been some claims that you're connected to some art that recently went missing. It was shipped to the museum, but never actually arrived. This was very valuable stuff, so we're being pressured to follow up on every lead we get," Yamato said, wanting to slap the naive smile from his face. "Really? Well, I wouldn't know anything about that. Why don't we just go to the precinct now while your friends here look through my apartment?" Naruto asked, sensing that this was the situation. Yamato replied, "That'll work just fine. I'll drive you there myself," and was taken aback by his willingness to let them stay alone at his house. "All right, let's go out then," Naruto said, grabbing the coat off his chair. He and Yamato descended the stairs and left the apartment. The Hidden Leaf apartment complex, so named due of its serene, isolated setting, was where Naruto lived on the top floor. Slightly over 600,000 people lived in the reasonably large metropolis of Konoha, and this complex was among the best in the entire city. Although the Hidden Leaf wasn't the most expensive location in Konoha, Naruto didn't want to stand out. It would be much too dangerous. "Honestly, Detective Yamato, with the number of times you've called me in for questioning, I almost think you have something against me," Naruto remarked with a cheeky smile. As Naruto continued to pick at him, Yamato ground his teeth and said, "What can I say? You simply seem to keep getting caught in our crosshairs. Your name comes up in practically every investigation I conduct or learn about." Naruto enjoyed making fun of Yamato. "You work as a homicide investigator, correct? You don't really cover theft, then? You must have learned about this and expressly requested to speak with me directly." Naruto's intelligence was undeniable, and Yamato said, I figured it was better that you were questioned by me rather than some stranger. Naruto climbed into his car when Yamato opened the passenger side door, saying, well, thank you for being so considerate. My pleasure, Yamato responded, slamming the door. Naruto simply grinned, knowing that today would be enjoyable. They quickly arrived at the precinct and arranged Naruto in an interrogation room. At the moment, Yamato was observing him through a one-way glass, which allowed him to see Naruto but prevented Naruto from seeing him. In fact, he had long since forgotten how many times he had observed the blonde in this manner. Almost all of the murder investigations Yamato had been following for the past 21 months seemed to involve Naruto in some way, and at the very least, the name Uzumaki came up. Yamato had a gut feeling that this guy was dirty, and when he looked into it, he discovered that Naruto Uzumaki was on almost everyone's watch list. It seemed like everyone in the world believed he was a criminal, but no one had any evidence to support their claims. A tiny, gray-haired man entered at that moment, wearing a suit that resembled Yamato's, but with a mask made of thin black cloth covering his mouth and a patch over his left eye. Yamato saw him right away and said, Hey Kakashi, do you need anything? Come on, Yamato. Why are you putting yourself through this again? Kakashi sighed as he glanced at the person in the interrogation room. You are aware that you have nothing to do with him. Our friend here may be connected to some stolen artwork, according to a call my friend received today. Yamato told the older guy resolutely, I told him that everything dealing with Uzumaki should go through me. When Kakashi learned that Yamato would be observing everything Naruto did, he became extremely upset. Aren't you going a touch overboard here? You know you have better things to do with your time? With the words, I know this sick fuck is hiding something and I'm not just gonna let him walk, Yamato could not have believed Kakashi was more mistaken. Yamato, I'm 45 years old, but I went gray way back in my 20s because I stressed myself out chasing leads that would never go anywhere, said Kakashi, shaking his head and running his fingers through his hair. In my opinion, it would be preferable for you to simply let this individual go and look for a case that has a possibility of being prosecuted. Hell, you have no idea whether he did anything at all. Oh, he did something all right, and I'll be on him like shit on Velcro until I find out what, Yamato said, turning to face the interrogation chamber once more. Well, I suppose that's up to you. I'll come in and take off my mask to scare him if you need some help, Kakashi joked as he walked out of the room. Yamato continued to gaze at Naruto and remarked, very funny Kakashi. All right, you freaking punk, let's see what you're hiding. Naruto took stock of the all-too-familiar integration and made the same observation he always made. This room was one of the most boring places a person could ever be stuck in. Apart from the glass window and a few filing cabinets, there was nothing to look at, and the walls were a baby barf greenish color with chipping paint. His home may not have had much, but at least he kept the walls a pleasant white that didn't insult your eyes. He couldn't wait for Yamato to enter so he would have something to do. With a file on the table, Yamato said, We've still got this left over from the last time we had to go through your house, when the door finally opened and he entered. Right, back when my old teacher Mizuki died, Naruto recalled. He was murdered, and you had motive and means to do it, Yamato reminded him. Yes, but you didn't discover any proof that I was involved in it. Naruto recalled his former teacher and laughed to himself at the asshole's current location. Besides, I wouldn't call him flunking me in high school a motive for murder, he remarked. After perusing the file, Yamato showed Naruto some images of expensive gadgets and remarked, You do very well for yourself for someone who didn't finish high school. After examining the photos, Naruto said, I can tell that the restaurant I opened is doing really well. I'm getting really rich from Tucci and Ayame. A lot of people these days are using their business to launder money so they can spend their ill-gotten gains, Yamato told him bluntly. Yamato's lack of nuance was always admired by Naruto, who said, Yeah, I've heard something about that kind of stuff. Naturally, I would never act in such a manner. Of course not, Yamato said, a little irritated. So, aside from this call, what makes you think I might have something to do with this? Naruto chose to get right to the point. Well, the first time we went into your apartment we found a few pieces of very nice art, Yamato would have to fake, since he had hoped you wouldn't ask that. We don't have any other leads, and it's obvious that you adore art. We simply didn't want to overlook anything because it's such a costly work of art. Naruto pretended it didn't matter, saying, I get it. Soon, you'll realize that I have nothing at all to conceal. May I ask what the deal is with this fox thing? Yamato asked, bringing forth a final image of Naruto's dresser with a fox statue. I simply must find out what the devil it is. At the mere mention of the fox, Naruto grinned and said, that my friend would be the Kyuubi. In Japanese folklore, he is an old monster. According to legend, he could use one of his 9 tails to create valleys and destroy mountains. But he's also a master at being cunning. They claim that he could assume any shape he desired and that no one would be able to tell the difference. He had shown a great deal of interest in this stuff, as Yamato could see. You seem to be quite fond of it. You're clueless. I was younger when I got the tattoo of it on my back. Without question, the Kyuubi takes what it desires. Sometimes it will use his brains for amusement and not even employ its power. Sort of like me, Naruto remarked, his voice tinged with pride. Are you saying that you take whatever you want and don't care about the consequences? Yamato asked, sensing that he had discovered a means of approaching Naruto. Quickly catching himself, Naruto said, I was more referring to not always using my power and sometimes just letting my intelligence take over. You're suggesting that you have a lot of power? Yamato continued to attack everything he could, he stated. Is there anything I can say that you won't try to find some deeper meaning in? Naruto asked, laughing. Leaning back in his chair, Yamato said, perhaps it's just the way you talk. Yamato was about to reply when a woman in a suit and skirt with long black hair and ruby eyes entered the questioning room. She said, well then it's a good thing he won't be doing any more talking. Looking up at the woman, Naruto said, well, if it's not my beautiful lawyer, Ms. Kurenai Yuhi, it's always nice to see you. Naruto is the same. Would you mind telling me why you are speaking with my client without his lawyer present, detective? Even better, how was it possible to obtain a warrant for his flat based just on an anonymous phone call? With some annoyance, Kurenai inquired. At this point, Yamato was quite familiar with Kurenai Yuhi, who was not just a lawyer but also Konoha's best lawyer. They dubbed her the Mistress of Illusion because of her capacity to persuade a judge or jury to believe nearly anything, saying things like, that's really none of your concern, Ms. Yuhi. If I believe you are pestering my client, then it is. Over the past year, how many times have you called him in with scant or no proof? Kurenai remarked in a very menacing tone, you're lucky I haven't complained to your superiors. Now, Kurenai, he's just doing his job, Naruto said, stopping her as he stood. Their search must have yielded nothing. Kurenai turned back to Yamato and said, he's right on that much. They found nothing at all when I visited there prior to coming here. You've squandered everyone's time once more, detective. Please make sure it doesn't occur again. Yamato said, my apologies, I'll try and be more cautious next time, realizing he would have to save face. As Kurenai and Naruto left, Kurenai said, make sure you do, or I'll take your badge. Yamato muttered to himself as they departed, another day, another crime you've wormed your way out of. As they were leaving, Kurenai was giving Naruto advice. I'm telling you, Naruto, you need to make a complaint. They can't drag you in like this any longer. Like usual, Naruto waved the entire situation away, saying, nah, it's just too much fun watching Yamato chase after me over and over again. All well, if that's what you want. Kurenai cautioned, you're just lucky Kakashi called me before you could have given Yamato anything he could use. I wouldn't do something that stupid and you know it, Naruto said, feeling that she was underestimating him. Why don't we simply talk about something else? For example, how are things going between you and Asuma? With a slight flush, Kurenai simply had to smile and say, you were right, once you get to know him he's sweet, kind, smart, and he's great in bed. I had no idea you had it in you, Kurenai, Naruto said, knowing they would click. Good for you. He noticed that Kakashi had emerged behind them. I'm going to go talk to Kakashi, he said. It's always nice to see you, Kurenai. Kurenai answered, yeah, you too, and waved. Making sure Yamato wasn't observing them, Kakashi approached him from behind and said, want to tell me what the devil happened back there? With a questioning gaze, Naruto asked, what do you mean? The same thing that always occurs happened. I messed with Yamato for a little while before leaving. I don't care about that at all. Who in the hell is calling you anonymously? Kakashi's voice was a mix of dread and rage as he spoke. Naruto realized all of a sudden, oh, that. Yes, I will investigate it before I can provide you with a definitive response. Well, you'd better be quick about it, said Kakashi, who didn't think that was good enough. The person who left this call seems to want to assist Yamato, who is determined to take your ass down. It's one thing to sidestep the odd piece of paperwork or lead them astray regarding an investigation once in a while, but I'm beginning to have to shield your ass every other week. Not long from now, people will begin to doubt everything I do. For the past 3.5 years, Kakashi had been Naruto's man on the inside, telling him about everything that was going on in the precinct and who they were looking at for recent crimes. On multiple occasions, Kakashi had told Naruto who to pay off or what to do when people began to investigate his business, and Naruto couldn't help but feel a little guilty at the idea of Kakashi getting caught because of him. Naruto wouldn't know what to do without him. Look, man, I apologize for everything. I am aware that you were going above and above for me, and I am grateful. In order to convince Yamato to stop pursuing me, I'll instruct Kurenai to report him. After that, I'll determine who is attempting to harm me. Kakashi was about to continue when Naruto started running after Kurenai and shouting, "Hey Kurenai, wait a minute. Maybe I did stick my neck out for you, but let's face it," said Kakashi, who didn't feel entirely at ease in this situation. "That was how much I owed you." Rewind to 4 years ago. Naruto yelled, "You son of a bitch. You ruined my life," from the holding cell. "Please, just let me explain," was the first time Kakashi had ever felt this guilty. "I don't care. There's nothing that you can say that would make me forgive you," was Naruto's constant yell. Kakashi tried to think, "Let me try and make it up to you. I'll just Naruto said, "You can go fuck yourself for all I care," as he turned to face the other 8 individuals in his holding cell. Kakashi simply kept his horrified gaze fixed on the bars. He only needed to make this right, but he would. The end of the flashback, it had taken some effort, but Kakashi did make up for it to Naruto that day. He had been watching out for Naruto ever since that day. He truly didn't want to consider what he had done to Naruto to cause him such distress. Not now, anyhow. It was simply too excruciating. Naruto called a friend to begin attempting to determine who had gotten him hauled in after he had reached Kurenai and instructed her to make the complaint, something she had been delighted about. Naturally, he made use of the prepaid cell phone once more. As the phone rang, he pressed the button and said, "Come on man. Pick up, pick the hell up." After a moment, a young guy on the other side said, "Hello, Nara Technical Support, Shikamaru speaking." "Hey Shikamaru, it's Naruto. I got something I need you to do for me," Naruto said. A young, slender, black-haired genius, Shikamaru Nara has assisted Naruto multiple times. He may have pretended to be the owner of an electoral repair business, but his true source of income was his ability to get into almost any system on the planet. What did Ya need Naruto? Was just what Naruto needed at the moment. "We got someone who seems to be sticking their nose in my business. Kakashi should have sent you something so that you can figure out who it is. He's not allowed to track down anonymous calls," Naruto began. "But I am," said Shikamaru, "and I'll figure out where the call came from." Knowing that he had made the correct call, Naruto said, "Thanks a million, I'll be sure to send you your usual fee." As they conversed, Shikamaru brought up the message Kakashi had sent him, saying, "That's all I need. I can tell already that the call was sent from a landline." In jest, Naruto asked, "People still uses those?" "Apparently they do. I can almost guarantee you it's gonna be a house or apartment. I should have the address in 10 minutes, Shikamaru informed him. Shikamaru's speed with this nonsense usually amazed Naruto, who would say, "Sounds perfect. Do me a favor and send the address to Kiba and Ino once you've got it." After saying, "Sure thing, man. Talk to you later," Shikamaru hung up. "While they're taking care of that, I've got a meeting to set up," Naruto said, hanging up his phone as well before beginning to dial other numbers. Ino Yamanaka and Kiba Inuzuka were married when they were just 19 years old. Ino was working a day job at her parents' flower store until she could complete her psychology degree, and Kiba was working as a bartender to support herself while she studied to become a veterinarian. Both of them had led quite affluent lives and soon became disinterested in them. No thrill, no anxieties, no risks. When they first met, that boredom was momentarily relieved, but soon they became bored with one another. But at last, they discovered something to make them both laugh: breaking the law. They would sometimes forego a check or take a modest memento from a friend because it was so tiny at first. They were out of control and breaking the law whenever they could before they even realized what had happened. They thought it was some sort of weird drug. Pure enthusiasm. Even though it nearly killed them a few times, they quickly figured out how to enjoy themselves without getting into trouble with Naruto Uzumaki's assistance. Naruto made Kiba an offer after learning that he had been arrested for assault and battery. He had previously met Kiba. Naruto would ensure that Kiba and Ino were never caught, and they would become his personal fixers. For the two lovers, it was their ideal scenario. They were currently eating lunch with another couple they were acquaintances with at a classy restaurant. They were making up stories about college loans and such upscale nonsense. Ino was discussing the things she sells in her flower shop, and so this guy comes in and asks for half a dozen roses. I tell him that we only sell flowers by the dozen, which is true, it's my mom's policy. He flips out for no damn reason. Says that he only needs half a dozen and that's all he's paying for. Eventually I got him to pay for full dozen, but I almost had called the cops. Oh man, their companions chuckled, that's just too much. Kiba remarked, I think my girl can take care of herself just fine, she doesn't any cops to take care of her, as he felt his phone ring. These guys seem to know something about a blonde friend of yours, he said, looking down at his phone, which included only an address and a brief message. Go learn how. Hey babe, we're going to have to cut this lunch short, Kiba said, giving his wife a gentle tap on the shoulder. In order to keep the others from seeing, he held up the phone and said, looks like we do. I'm sorry guys, we'll catch up with you later. Not a problem guys, don't be strangers now, the two of them said as they stood up, their buddies waving goodbye. They waved back, and Kiba and Ino said, don't worry, we won't. After they had left the area, Ino remarked, talk about a couple of douchebags. Yeah, but they make us look good. At least we got to leave early, right? Kiba agreed wholeheartedly. I guess that's true. Now let's go have some real fun, said Ino and Kiba as they arrived at their car and took a few pistols out of their trunks. Everyone in Konoha would think you were crazy if you asked them who the 9 kings were. The other half would stare at you as if you were crazy to discuss the 9 kings, while the other half would look at you as if they had no idea what you were talking about. The 9 kings, then, were who? To put it simply, they were the 9 kings of the different crimes that happened in Konoha. No one questioned them because they knew what would happen if they did, and no one was superior to them. As the leader of this small group, Naruto's responsibility was to ensure that none of them were captured by using all of his contacts in the criminal and law enforcement communities. None of them engaged in conflict since each monarch had a lucrative dominion that no one could threaten. It was the ideal arrangement. Speaking of Naruto, he was in one of his favorite restaurants, waiting for the other 8 kings to arrive. Naturally, it wouldn't be his own, it would be much too dangerous. For a little extra money in his check at the end of the night, his friend Choji Akamichi, who owned a good restaurant, was more than happy to ignore anything criminal that occurred. Kakashi was sitting next to Naruto at the table, acting as a kind of bodyguard. The kings were not fools, but they all had faith in each other. In the event that something significant happened, nobody was going to enter totally unguarded. Gaara, the king of hitmen, was the first king to appear outside of Naruto. He was the person you saw in Konoha if you wanted someone murdered and you weren't prepared to kill them yourself. Gaara had a slender frame, short red hair, and was about Naruto's age. He was a fairly reserved individual, but you had better stay out of his way if you were upset with him. Beside him were his older sister Tamari, a stunning blonde who was proficient with a variety of knives, and his older brother Kankuro, a well-built, brown-haired man who knew more deadly poisons that wouldn't be discovered during an autopsy than you could shake a stick at. Good to see the two of you again. I do hope this meeting won't have too much bad news, he said, nodding as he approached Naruto and Kakashi. Gaara's monotone, I wouldn't say bad news, I just need to fill you guys in on something, had become familiar to Naruto by this time. After turning back and taking a seat, Gaara said, I'm glad to hear it. The next king, or queen, as it were, entered shortly after he had taken his seat. The queen of white-collar crime was Yugito, a blonde in exquisite clothing. Her specialty was insurance fraud, embezzlement, and bank fraud. Even though she was very good at what she did, she wasn't popular. She was a snobbish bitch, even the other kings had to acknowledge it. Her personal bodyguard was an elderly man with one eye named Dodai. Even though he appeared elderly, he was still capable of competing with the best of them. There was no one she even bothered to greet. This better be good, Naruto. I was in the middle of a rather important meeting, she said as she went straight to sit down. Kakashi interrupted Naruto as he was about to yell at her, saying, I assure, it's very important, Yugito. The next king came before Naruto could express his opinions. Yugaru, a 20-year-old blonde youth who appeared to be still growing, was the youngest king. He was the master of document falsification. With just a few pieces of paper, he could make and destroy people, not just basic little things. To kill someone, he only needed paper and ink, neither a pistol nor a knife. 2 of Konoha's most vicious motherfuckers served as his guards. Because of his vicious killings, Zabuza was referred to as a monster, while Kisame was given the moniker, the Shark, due to his sharper-than-natural teeth and allegations that he had experimented with cannibalism. He allowed the story to continue out of fear, even if it was untrue. As Zabuza and Kisame gave Naruto a brief greeting, Yugaru immediately went to his chair and took a seat. "So how's life been treating you, Yagaru?" Kakashi attempted to ask the young king. Yagaru's statement, "I'm not up for a conversation, Kakashi. I've never been much of a talker," made it obvious that he had no interest in engaging in conversation. As another king entered, Kakashi scowled beneath his mask. Most people referred to Roshi as the king bribery. Even Yugito couldn't dispute Roshi's skill at what is typically considered a white-collar crime. In most cases, he served as more of an advisor than a direct briber. It was his responsibility to advise others on who should be bribed, whether they should be bribed, how much they should pay, and other such matters. Having a person like Roshi was helpful when trying to avoid getting into a lot of trouble, of course, for his fee in cash. He was under the protection of his 23-year-old black-haired cousin, Kuretsuchi, who was an incredible fighter. "Nice to see you two again. How are you doing?" the bearded, red-haired man said as he shook Naruto and Kakashi's hands. Naruto said, "Thanks, we're doing great, how are you two?" Roshi remarked, "Can't complain, not that anyone would listen if I did," and took a seat. When Han, another of the kings who donned a mask and a big red straw hat, showed in, Kakashi laughed at the joke. The only thing you could see of him were his orangish-red eyes. He was a reserved individual who only ever spoke when someone spoke to him. Many people felt uneasy around him because of his attitude as well as his extraordinary height and muscularity. He was king of the black market. In Konoha, you had to go through him if you wanted to sell something that had been stolen. Han simply tipped his cap to them without actually saying anything. Beside him stood his bodyguard, Deidara, a guy who believed that art and explosions were mutually exclusive. Despite being mistaken for a woman on multiple occasions, he was a rather feminine male. Those who committed such error never did so again. In actuality, they never again located all portion of their bodies in one location. "So are you doing well, Han?" Naruto questioned Han as he sat down. "I'm doing very well, thank you," Han responded simply. Before the next king appeared, Naruto was unable to come up with anything to catch his attention. Utakata dominated the prostitute industry and was extremely skilled at it. By no means was the slender, dark-haired man a pimp. He was too intelligent to execute a stunt like that. He never beat or mistreated any of his girlfriends. He treated them all equally. They were aware that he expected to receive a specific percentage of their earnings and that they could leave if they didn't agree. He would kill them if they tried to sell him out. However, he would not be cruel. All it took was a single blow to the back of the head to end it. Beside him stood Mei, a voluptuous figure with mile-long legs, auburn hair, and a terrible beauty. Even though she had a cute appearance, she was a murderer. Mei began as just another call girl. But Utakata decided to employ her somewhere else after noticing her other abilities. Because men were willing to pay a premium price to be with her, she occasionally returned to her previous career. It's actually a rather expensive price. Utakata just remarked, "Glad we can all get together again. Hopefully we have a good time." Mei, who was often flirting, winked at Naruto as she passed. "I'll do my best," Naruto said, grinning a little. As she entered, the next king, who was actually queen, said, "Well, hey there, lover boy, how've you been?" At the age of 24, which was Naruto's age, Fu had brown skin and green hair that was purportedly natural, but few people took her word for it. She has a reputation for illegally trafficking exotic animals and items. In contrast to the majority of traffickers, Fu always ensured that the animals they caught and sold received humane treatment and were placed in a suitable home. Fu's only goal was to find a good home for uncommon animals. Her actual source of income was the trafficking of items. An old friend of hers, Shibuki, who had long black hair, was watching over her. He wasn't much to him. He was merely a generic bodyguard. Fu knew she could rely on Naruto to protect her if necessary. They had a relationship that went much beyond work. They had slept in each other's arms numerous times. Looking at his short skirt and somewhat skimpy top, Naruto said, "Damn Fu, you look great. Maybe you'll get to see how good later. Right now we've got a meeting to get underway," Fu said with a small laugh. Naruto remarked, "Aw man, you're killing me," as Fu touched his cheek. The last Kinga, a big, black man most people knew as Killer Bee, arrived at that point. Despite not using narcotics personally, he was known as the king of narcotics. Never get high on your own supply, as the saying goes, and Killer Bee primarily sold everything he could find. B was alright as long as you paid the charge. If you didn't, let's just pretend that the price was no longer being lowered. He also enjoyed rapping when he spoke, for whatever reason. "Yo, together we are the 9 kings. So let's commence with the meeting." B's bodyguard, his older brother A, who was so ripped that he could murder someone with his bare hands, slapped him and said, "Shut the hell up, B. Just as much fun as I remember, B. He's right though, why don't you sit down and we'll get this meeting started?" was Naruto's comment after finding B's rapping to be hilarious. They were both so inebriated that they were unable to recall their own names. Living in a house that looked like a stinking hut, they were two nobodies who spent their days getting high on prescription medications. It had a phone and a TV, though they couldn't afford cable. That was about it. They wasted every last penny they had on narcotics. They were simply lying on the floor, their features blank, their eyes fixed on the ceiling. Before they heard a knock on the door, they were in a state of empty pleasure. After stumbling up, one of them answered the door and said, "What the fuck do you want? Oh shit, get over here, dude." "Well, hi boys, how are you doing?" the other guy said, getting up and going to the door to discover a smoldering blonde there. "Did you call her?" they said, shocked by what they were witnessing. After shaking his head, the other man said, "No way, man, I ain't got that kind of cash." Ino said to the two inebriated men, "My name is Ino. Do you mind if my friend and I come inside?" One of the men said, "Holy shit, she's got a friend," and he grabbed his friendship shirt. Almost jumping up and down, the other one exclaimed, "Yeah, get your friend in here, babe." Her spouse was right behind Ino as she entered. With their pistols drawn, the two of them aimed at the stoned fool's head and said, "Thank you so much for letting us in so nicely, boys." "Oh man, look, what the fuck did we ever do to you people?" was the men's abrupt mood switch. With his rifle always aimed at the man's head, Kiba strolled past them and said, "It's not what you did to us, it's the call you made about a friend of ours, Naruto Uzumaki." One of them shouted, "Wait, that's the name that Dr. Guy said on the phone." The other person continued, "Yeah, we didn't have anything to do with that. We barely even heard what he said. He was just some guy who wanted to use our phone." "So why did you let him use your phone?" Ino asked, pressing her gun to the man's temple. "Because he was a doctor and he gave us our favorite pills. All he wanted us to do was let him use our phone," they were told. "And you never thought it was weird?" Kiba asked, rolling his eyes. "We just wanted the fucking drugs, man, we swear, please don't kill us," they said, both crying. Ino turned down her security features, "We would, but a couple of drug addicts who would do something that stupid for some pills really can't be trusted in any way, shape, or form. You're too stupid to try and trick us and too high to remember anything else. Pleasure talking with you though." The men's brains were splattered all over the floor as Kiba and Ino pulled their triggers. Given the mess they had created, Kiba said, "Thank God we ain't gotta clean that up." After taking a look around, Ino said, "Their couch seems pretty clean, perfectly usable. Nice and sturdy too." She was saying, "You wanna fuck on their couch, don't you?" And Kiba understood. Ino said, "You got a problem with that," grinning sensuously. "Not even a little bit. Just let me call Shikamaru and tell him what we found," Kiba said, removing his jacket. Naruto's phone rang as he was telling the kings what had happened with Yamato, which annoyed them all a little. However, when Naruto realized it was Shikamaru, he had to answer. "So you're sure they had no connection to anyone?" And, "I guess that makes sense if he was a doctor," were some of the things they all muttered as they watched him nod. After hanging up, Naruto said to the others, "Well, it appears that the doctor was the one who called. Oh, for God's sake, before we start hearing this crap about some doctor who probably won't even turn out to have existed, I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking. Why aren't we wondering what Han's place in all this is? I mean, it was his stolen art that they were saying you're involved with, right?" Yugito burst into tears. "What did you just say?" asked the normally composed Han as he stood up. "You heard me. I was just telling the truth," said Yugito, who also got to his feet. "For a woman you've got a set of balls on you," Han said, his eye twitching with anger. "Enough. Both of you just shut the fuck up," Naruto said, slamming his hand down on the table. "Don't you dare talk to me that way," Yugito sent him a fierce gaze. "Don't you dare open your mouth again. You're accusing Han on some baseless hunch and I won't stand for it," said Naruto. "I'd trust any of the 9 kings with my life and I'd like to think you'd all do the same." "Do I need to remind you, Yugito, of the promise we all made 4 years ago?" Gaara interrupted. Naruto lifted his shirt up to reveal the Kyuubi on his back, while he pulled his shirt down to reveal a tanuki tattoo on his shoulder. Yugito felt a blue cat with 2 tails tattooed on her ankle, which made her feel a little embarrassed. Yugaru felt the 3-tailed turtle tattoo on his side. Han felt the 5-tailed horse on his right, while Roshi felt the tattoo of a four-tailed ape on his left bicep. Fu touched the seven-tailed locust on her waist, while Utataku placed his palm on the six-tailed slug on his chest. B placed his hand on the tattoo of an eight-tailed bull on his neck. Naruto recalled to them all, when we all got put in that holding cell together, we promised that we would protect one another and make each other completely untouchable. You saw my tattoo and Gaara's tattoo and decided you each get one for yourself as a mark. That's the way we've lived for the past 4 years, and we've built something pretty great here, haven't we? Yugito turned to Han after they all nodded, adding, I guess that I shouldn't have accused so quickly. Naruto, as you were saying. When Naruto finished, my guy says that a doctor used some no-name druggie's phone to make the call accusing me. He probably pulled some files to see who had a track record of being cut off from getting painkillers for abusing them and went to the trashy place he could find so that whoever he used wouldn't be credible enough to ID him. Okay, but why? He must have known it wouldn't actually do anything, Fu thought. As Naruto put it, I think he was trying to send a message. He knows who we are and he's coming for us. Gaara's answer was straightforward. We'll just have to kill him. Well yeah, but we have to figure out who he is first. All we know is that he's a doctor, which isn't much to go on. I just wanted to fill you all in on what happened. Keep an eye out for anybody being weird. Okay. Everyone nodded. Good, dinner's on me and I'll see you all later. Fu grabbed Naruto's arm as he was about to leave, saying, You're not going anywhere without me. We haven't gotten together in 2.5 weeks. For the rest of the night, you're mine. You can leave for the night. Looks like I'm going to be very busy, Naruto said with a smile to Kakashi. Kakashi yelled, Don't forget to use protection you two, as they left. Before they had even entered the blonde's apartment, Naruto and Fu had already begun fighting. Fu pushed Naruto against a wall and pressed her lips on his as soon as Naruto shut the door. Naruto remembers how soft and thrilling the girl's lips were. As Fu pushed her expert tongue into his mouth, he returned the kiss and moaned softly. When Naruto grabbed her by the waist and carried her inside his bedroom, she gave a small, startled squeal. Before removing his shirt, Naruto shoved her onto his bed and said, It has been way too long since we did this. With nothing on underneath, Fu took off her own shirt and said, Well then come and get it, big boy. With a lip lick, Naruto said, My pleasure. Orochimaru had very few friends and even fewer allies. He was a sickly-looking man with oily black hair and pale white complexion. Not exactly the sort of person you thought you could rely on. Because of this, most people found it shocking that he was a doctor. However, the unsightly man wasn't your average doctor because he had committed several unethical acts during his career. When a homeless person or someone without family, basically, someone no one would miss, arrived at the hospital where he worked, he would invite them to spend the night in his residence so they would have somewhere to stay. But you were never allowed to leave after you arrived to reside with Orochimaru. He experimented on those individuals for his own purposes. Despite Orochimaru's brilliance, most people thought his experiments were strange and nasty. Most of his experiments focused on attempting to extend the average human lifetime using some quite repulsive methods. He would open them up and meddle with almost everything he came across. To his dismay, no one he had ever experimented on had survived, yet everyone he had experimented on turned out to be monsters after Orochimaru was done. Nevertheless, he was coming closer every day because of his work with stem cells, organ transplantation, and other various things. The insane doctor was currently planning his next experiment while sitting at his desk with a file in his hand. He was able to concentrate on his small pastime after wrapping up his regular patients 30 minutes earlier. Orochimaru had to answer his prepaid cell phone when he heard it buzz on his desk and recognized the caller ID. Good evening, Madara, what can I do for? After coughing a few times, Madara said, Just checking in to see how the first phase of the plan is going. Oh, it's going swimmingly. I made the call last night, so I'm sure they got the message. It's been made quite clear to them something is very wrong with their organization, Orochimaru boasted. Good. Make sure you Kaga cough. Do everything exactly as I told you or I will back out of my end of the deal, Madara said, trying to continue but finding it difficult due to his persistent coughing. A little annoyed by Madara's tone, Orochimaru said, Fine, but for the record, I believe that I'm intelligent enough to help you actually plan this operation and not just be your little puppet. Frankly, Orochimaru, while I do respect you, I'm smart enough to run circles around you, however. Cough. Cough. I'm in no condition to argue right now, Madara screamed. Just keep doing as I say and you'll get your money when this all over. Madara quickly hung up before Orochimaru could even finish speaking. He needed the money, even though he detested that old man. Only a few months prior, he had struck a bargain with that lunatic, and he would never forget that day. Rewind. It was intended to be a standard checkup on a wealthy individual. Madara Uchiha, who was 103 years old, was considered ancient by most people. He was the grandson of United Sharingan Defense's founder, a huge weapons firm. They were well known for their Susanoo body armor, the best bulletproof vest ever created, the Mangekyo sniper rifle, which any skilled marksman could use to clear a room from a great distance, and the Amaterasu Flame Grande, which, because of how quickly the flames spread, could burn down an entire city with just one. The Uchihas had billions of dollars. The key term here was were, because their stocks had started to plummet to the point where they were nearly worthless. Now that the hostilities were finished, the United Nations was even investigating parts of United Sharingan Defense's previous activities due to allegations that the corporation had intentionally provided terrorist groups hazardous weaponry. The worst thing was that they had in fact sold weapons to some pretty dubious organizations. Madara believed that they had weapons if they were prepared to pay the price. The business would probably have to pay some large fines after the inquiry was finished, and there might even be some arrests. Given that he was too old for prison to be a concern anyhow, Madara had at least been astute enough to ensure that the majority of the blame would be placed on him. He was aware that since the company had previously been implicated in the illicit arms trade, they would be prohibited from manufacturing or distributing any type of weaponry. The United Sharingan Defense only had the means to produce weapons. They would go bankrupt in the time it would take to develop a new product to mass produce. However, the Uchiha could not allow their business to be ranked below that of the Aburame or Hyuga families. However, there was only one activity that was as lucrative as war: criminality. Madara only required a little assistance to get the Uchiha family involved in criminal activity. Assistance from a physician about whom he had discovered some fascinating facts. Orochimaru entered Madara's chamber, which was crammed with pricey objects of all sizes and forms, and took his belongings to a seat. Even though his business was dying, Madara apparently required to show off his wealth as soon as you met him. Even though he lived alone, you'd think that the enormous estate he occupied would be sufficient evidence of it. Unfortunately, he would probably have to sell everything he possessed in order to pay off his debts if things continued as they were. In an attempt to strike up a conversation while searching his suitcase for necessities, Orochimaru said, "So Mr. Uchiha, I understand you're the head of a very large company." "I was the head," Madara informed him, "and I was asked to resign after some new information surfaced." "True," Orochimaru said, "but to run a company from your bed, that must take a lot of skill." "Well, I may be old, but I'm still smarter than any of the other little shits who worked at United Sharingan Defense," Madara said with a slight smirk of triumph. "That's good to know," said Orochimaru, holding a couple syringes now. "This time, I'll give you your usual vaccinations, nothing different." "Good, those things make me feel awful," Madara replied while wearing a distressed expression. As he searched for a suitable vein to use on Madara, Orochimaru said, "Well, I'll do my best to make sure you don't feel too sick." Madara decided it was time to implement his plan as Orochimaru inserted the needle into his arm, saying, "Did you know that I requested for you specifically?" As he took out the first syringe and prepared the next, Orochimaru was taken aback. "Really? Why did you do it, then?" Madara clarified, "Because I've heard some very interesting things about you." "Like what?" Orochimaru asked as he inserted the subsequent syringe. Quote, "Madara was going to like this. You see, I had intentionally deleted the past of several men who worked for me. Even though the police didn't like what they had done, they were still important enough that I didn't want to lose them. I had thus given them new names. No, they no longer had a family because they had to adopt the new identities. You ended up treating one of these men after he had to go to the hospital." Orochimaru's pulse began to quicken. "Is it correct?" Quote, since he had captured Orochimaru's interest, Madara said, "Yes, but we never did see him again after that." "So, how can you be certain that I handled him?" Orochimaru inquired uneasily. Madara anticipated his question. "I investigate when one of my employees disappears. Orochimaru, my private detective, learned a lot about you, and I have to say that you have some really fascinating pastimes. Just so we're clear, I have no problem with what you're doing." Madara could already tell what was going through Orochimaru's mind, which was racing. This old son of bitch knew exactly what he was doing. He needed to think. There must have been something that he could do to ensure he wouldn't talk. Orochimaru blinked a few times in bewilderment, asking, "What do you mean?" He was aware that Madara had captured his attention, saying, "I happen to respect what you're doing. The fact that we aren't doing everything we can to extend human life is barbarous. Cowards use the terms ethical and humane to prevent those like us from achieving immortality. That Madara shared his perspective astounded Orochimaru, who said, "Nice to see someone else understands." It was time to make Orochimaru the offer, and Madara wasn't lying either. He thought Orochimaru had every right to do what he was doing because, after all, if humans could find a way to live longer, why not? I assume you've heard about the problems that have been plaguing my family's business lately? Well, Orochimaru was aware of it. Almost everyone on the planet has heard about it. It's essentially national news when a corporation of that size fails. All okay. I am aware that we will run out of money within a year if we lose our previous military contracts. But the Uchiha cannot pass away in that manner. I will not permit it, Madara declared resolutely. After giving Madara the final syringe, Orochimaru asked, "So then what are you going to do?" This was something Madara had been planning for a while. I used crime to save this company once, and now I'm gonna use crime to save it again. Intrigued, Orochimaru asked, "You utilized crime to defend United Sharingan Defense?" Madara nodded slightly and said, "Yes, I did. I don't usually have to commit murder, but business is business. I've determined that our business will now be crime since it can no longer be war. I'm going to seize control of the biggest criminal organization Konoha has ever seen, using the remaining power my firm has." Orochimaru was very disoriented and questioned, "What in the hell are you talking about and what does any of this have to do with me?" Madara realized it was time to stop beating around in the bush. "I told you before that I erased my employees' past when I needed to. Well, that wasn't completely true, as I couldn't do it completely by myself. It took the help of someone named Yagura, the king of falsifying documents, to it. He's called a king because he's a member of the Nine Kings, Konoha's top criminal organization. I know about the organization, but I've never heard of Yagura himself," Orochimaru said, referring to his prior knowledge of them. Madara ignored it. "Not important. What is important is that I intend to use my intelligence and what's left of my company's power to take over the Nine Kings. Before I die, which in my shape will be soon, I'm going to overthrow the Nine Kings and replace them with people I know I can trust. They'll take orders from my successors and the money they make will be laundered into United Sharingan Defense. With that money, this company will never be at risk of dying ever again." "Why are telling me all this?" Orochimaru asked, still not understanding what was happening. "I'm getting to that," Madara said. "I can't get this done on my own, but I also don't want any of my successors do my bidding in case the worst should happen and we get caught." "You keep mentioning these successors, but who are they?" Orochimaru had been thinking. Madara realized that he hadn't clarified that part. "Another Uchiha, of course. One of my sons would have been ideal, but they're all dead. One of my grandsons perhaps, although Obito's never been one for business, and Fugaku. Well, he's no longer with us. I think I'll go with one of my great-grandsons, Sasuke or Itachiya." Orochimaru apologized for asking. "Talk about a drawn-out explanation. So you don't want your successors to get caught? Does that mean you want me to be the one who does all your bidding?" Finally laying his offer on the table, Madara stated, "You really are a smart one. You'll do every little thing I ask of you, and in exchange I'll see to it that you get funding that can be used for your experiments." It was hard for Orochimaru to believe. As he put it, "I've done so much already, just imagine how much more I could do with some extra money." This was his first opportunity to receive actual cash. Reminding him, "You only get the money if you do what I ask. Based on your reaction, I assume you have a deal." After shaking Madara's hand, Orochimaru said, "Yes, we have a deal." The end of the flashback. Even though it was a shady job, Orochimaru would comply with Madara's requests till he had that valuable cash. After grabbing his phone, he dialed. Time to get the next phase of this plan into action. Beside his sweetheart, Naruto smiled blissfully. There was simply a thin sheet covering their bodies. After a night of intense passion, they had just woken up and were completely content. It was odd, though, because for Naruto, nothing was better than feeling Fu's warm body next to him and her head resting on his shoulder. Fu was drawing tiny circles on Naruto's chest with her finger. That was just incredible. "It always is with you. As much as I'd love to just lay here, why don't you get up so that I can make the two of us a late breakfast?" Naruto kissed her on the top of the head. "I'd love to, but I've got to go home get changed for my meeting with my uncle. I'm supposed to have lunch with him," Fu said, removing the covers off her. As Naruto gazed at Fu's stunning physique, he said, "Oh come, you've got time to eat." According to Fu, "No, I really don't. I've got to get cleaned up and put on some fresh clothes." She began putting on the clothes she had worn the previous evening. "You can shower here and just wear the clothes you wore last night," Naruto attempted to explain. With an insane expression on his face, Fu said, I'm not going to see my uncle in dirty clothes. Naruto got to his feet and put his palms over Fu's face. Both of them moaned a little as he kissed her for a long time with passion. Please stay, he whispered as he withdrew, just stay for a while. Believe me, I really do want to stick around but I just can't. I've got nothing here to change into, Fu said, feeling terrible about leaving. Why don't you leave some stuff over here? Replied Naruto. Some clothes and a toothbrush. Stuff like that. You can stay overnight and not have to leave first thing in morning for once. The sly grin Fu gave Naruto said, that's a pretty big step, Naruto. You sound like you're really starting to care about me. You're the only girl I've fucked for the past year. Of course I care about you, Naruto said without disagreeing. To be fair, we do fuck an awful lot, Fu said. The recollections made Naruto grin. Yes we do. So will you leave some stuff here next time? He asked. With a quick peck on his cheek, Fu said, I'd be happy to. You'd better make me a pretty great breakfast next I come here. As she turned to go, Naruto remarked, you're about to see just how good of a cook I really am. Okay, I'll see you later, Naruto, Fu said as he walked from the bedroom to Naruto's front door. As she shut the door, Naruto groaned and said, see you later, you sexy green-haired vixen. It was true that Fu had to rush to a meeting. One of the most influential figures in the criminal underworld, Uncle Kakuzu, was the man she was going to visit. Even though Kakuzu wasn't a member of the Nine Kings, nobody in Konoha would ever touch him. He was far too important to them to do that. Because he only made loans to criminals, Kakuzu played a significant role in Konoha's criminal underworld. It was untraceable money that could be obtained without a background check. But borrowing money from him was also quite dangerous. He charged exorbitant interest rates on loans, and he would do a lot of terrible things, including killing you, if you were even a day late in repaying him. Things were pretty gruesome if you didn't receive his money within the week. Because he would remove someone's heart and sell it on the underground market to recoup the money they owed him, he had come to be known as the Demon of Hearts. The combination of getting at least some of his money back and making others fearful of him was ideal. Apart from the fact that he broke people's hearts, the only odd thing about him was that nobody knew where he got the money. Even at first, Kakuzu appeared to have an endless supply of money that he could just take out of thin air. They had no idea where he kept it, how much he had, or what he did with it besides lending it to others. At 78, he had lived a lot longer than the typical criminal underworlder. Despite his advanced age, he sought to maintain as much mobility as possible. You passed away the instant you ceased to move. Kakuzu had survived by not caring about anyone except for one persona, and by not trusting anyone at all. Right now, the Demon of Hearts was in his dark office, waiting for his niece, Fu. His guards surrounded him, but since they all trusted Fu, they were largely bored. For safety, Kakuzu kept guards around at all times. There was Pakura, a pyromaniac whom Kakuzu honestly thought funny, Sasori, who had educated Konkuro about poisons and who genuinely feared the youngster had outstripped him, and Hidan, a madman who people frequently joked was eternal due to all the near misses he had survived. She was the one person he truly liked, to be honest. He had been considering all of this when someone knocked on his door. Out of instinct, he yelled, "Come in." His gorgeous green-haired niece said, "Hey Uncle Kakuzu, I see you're still a damn vampire," as the door opened. When she asked, "Did you want to get better view of my wrinkled old face or my black wiry hair?" Kakuzu realized she was referring to how dim he kept it. Fu approached her uncle and planted a tender kiss on his forehead, saying, "I was just picking at you, that's all. You're the only person who can pick at me without getting killed, you know," Kakuzu said, chuckling at his niece's attitude. "Yeah, I know. So what did you get us for lunch?" Fu said as he took a seat across from him. "I got you a chicken salad from that place down the block that you like and got myself a cheeseburger," Kakuzu said, removing a few takeout boxes from beneath his desk. As she opened her salad, Fu shook her head and said, "Those damn things are gonna kill you. Either those or the cigars you smoke anyways." Kakuzu retorted, "I'm 78 years old, I don't give a fuck anymore." "I guess you've earned the right to do what you want at this point," Fu couldn't dispute with. "Damn straight little girl. Besides, I still work out from time to time, so what's be going on with you?" Kakuzu said, because she had earned it. "Well, Naruto wants me to start leaving stuff at his place so that we can spend more time together," Fu stated after taking a piece out of her salad. As he began to eat his cheeseburger, Kakuzu said, "Well, that's good. It's funny though, I can remember a time just a few years ago when you came in ranting about how you hated the guy. We argued a lot, But that was mainly because I didn't like him being in charge. Fu was shocked to find that he still recalled that. You don't like anybody but yourself to be in charge, Kakuzu said, raising an eyebrow. Fu wanted to say something, but she didn't have anything on which to stand. No, I don't. Still, Naruto didn't take any of my shit. When we'd argue, he'd fight right back. One time we were arguing really hard, I don't even remember what it was about anymore, and he'd brought his face right up next to mine. Something about the fight in his eyes and the fact that he wasn't backing down, it was all just kind of sexy. Looking up from his meal, Kakuzu said, that doesn't sound weird at all. Fu gave him a playful tap on the shoulder. Shut up. The next thing I knew we were in bed together. Naruto wasn't a jerk about it either, in fact he was really sweet the morning after. He even said that if I didn't want him to tell anyone about what happened that he wouldn't. After that I couldn't deny that he was a good guy who was really just trying to do what was best for the 9 kings. I stopped being stubborn and before I knew it, we were in an honest-to-goodness relationship. When Kakuzu said, very sweet, in a bloody criminal type of way. Yeah, we're not exactly Romeo and Juliet, Fu said, nearly spitting up her salad because she thought it was hilarious. So how is Naruto doing? Kakuzu asked, wiping his mouth with a tissue. At that point, Fu's attitude slightly changed. He's doing okay, but it's looking like someone might be coming after the kings. Who in the fuck has the balls to do that? Was Kakuzu's reaction when he saw something like that. According to Fu, hell if I know, but they'd better have a damn army them, she wished she knew. Kakuzu threw the box in the trash after finishing his cheeseburger, saying, if they're taking you guys on, then that would be the case. Pakura went to check on the person who had knocked on the door. It's Sakin and he doesn't have the money. It's been 8 days, sir, she said, opening the door just enough to speak with the person before turning to Kakuzu. Fu, would you excuse me for a moment? Kakuzu said as he rose from his desk. Fu was prepared. I'm gonna go make a few quick calls in the other room. I love you to death, but this part just creeps the hell out me. So you're 8 days late with your payments? Kakuzu asked as he opened the door to let Sakin in after observing her enter the lounge, which was located just next to the office. Sakin fell to his knees. Please Kakuzu, you have to understand that position I'm in. They're just not buying anything I'm selling, if you just give me a month. Sakin was thrown to the ground as Kakuzu seized his hair and said, a month? That's not how this works and you know it. One way or another, I'm getting my money. You can have anything else, my liver, my kidney, just not my heart, Sakin said as he attempted to crawl away. With a hammer in hand, Kakuzu said, I'm going to enjoy my visit with my niece. In the meantime, you're going to take a little nap and my friends here will prep you for surgery. We can work something out, was Sakin's constant plea. Raising his hammer, Kakuzu said, no, we can't. He used a hammer to strike Sakin over the head just hard enough to render him unconscious. Keep him knocked out for the next few hours. I'm going to spend a couple more hours with Fu, he said, turning to face Sasori. He was being lifted by Sasori and Pakura, who began to move him while Hidan smiled and said, I love working for that crazy motherfucker. Naruto made the decision to go get a bite to eat with an old friend because he was unable to have a late breakfast with his favorite girl. Since the person he was visiting might be the only one with the intelligence to understand what was happening with 9 kings, it was a win-win situation. He went to the last location you would ever expect a thief to go after getting some lunch for the two of them. The home of a former police officer. Naruto rang the doorbell as he approached the front door of a charming little house. Naruto, what a nice surprise. Oh, and it looks like you brought a little food too. What's the occasion? Said an elderly man with long white hair as soon as he answered the door. Hey Jiraiya. I just came to ask you a few questions. Since I was going to come here, I figured why not make it fun, Naruto said, giving the elderly man a brief embrace. After giving him a backslap, Jiraiya said, any excuse to get you over here is good enough for me, and the two entered. Naruto felt relieved to discuss all of this with Jiraiya. Jiraiya was the master of deductive reasoning, while Shikamaru was like a genius and Kakashi was a fantastic investigator. The man is capable of challenging Sherlock Holmes. In his heyday, he was one of Konoha's best investigators, but he had long since retired. Even if he didn't always agree with his friend's behavior, he now only offered them counsel. So are these things you need to ask me about related to the 9 kings? He asked, genuinely concerned about Naruto's current behavior. The question made Naruto wince, and he said, yes, they are. After letting out a sigh, Jiraiya placed the meal on the table and said, Naruto, what you're doing is wrong. How many times do I have to say it? Naruto didn't know what to say to him. We're a lot better than most criminals you know. Gaara only takes hits out on people he feels earned it. Fu makes sure her animals are treated well. Yugito rips off people off of money that could have gone into the economy. Yagura makes documents that let criminals run free. Roshi helps pay off juries and rap victims. Jiraiya replied. Need I go on? If you don't like it, then why don't you just turn me in? Naruto said Jiraiya as he handed her one of the 2 bowls of Tuchi's specialty, ramen. Jiraiya didn't think that was the best option. Throwing you in prison won't do any good. You would either get life in prison or be put away for so long that you wouldn't have even a chance of a normal life when you got out, and that's if you made a deal. That's not what I want, and that's not what your father would have wanted. I've said it once and I'll say it again, my father isn't here. Don't try pulling my mom out either, because she's gone too, Naruto muttered, hanging his head in frustration. I guess you're tired of hearing about him, huh? Jiraiya should have seen it wouldn't work. You don't even know that half of it. Everyone who knows who my dad was just loves to brag about how he was this great hero and was like Konoha's own personal white knight. I get it, he was awesome, but I'm not him, Naruto remarked as he got ready to eat his favorite food. With a slight prod at his food, Jiraiya said, your father was the closest thing I've ever had to a son. I guess I just want what's best for the closest thing I've ever had to a grandson. Naruto stopped while eating. Look, I appreciate all that you're doing for me, but I just like things the way they are. Can we please just focus on the issue with the 9 kings and talk about this some other day? I suppose that'll have to do. So, what exactly are these problems of yours? Jiraiya could accept that. After that, Naruto filled him in on everything that had occurred the previous day. All about the enigmatic doctor and his summons. He even informed him that Han had been accused of betraying the Yugito. Jiraiya started to consider more deeply the more he listened. After concluding his conclusion, Naruto said, well, I must say, it was a very brilliant first move to make. For example, Naruto could have said, okay, I was hoping for a little more than that. Jiraiya thought that was somewhat ambiguous. I'll try to explain. This call served 3 purposes. First, it got all of the king's attention. That's why he went after you, someone who affect all 9 of the kings. Second, it got the kings wondering about one another. Just look at the way Yugito talked about Han. Last but not least, they got the police looking at you. Well, the last part must have backfired, because I told Kurenai to file a complaint against Yamato, Naruto replied. Jiraiya was aware of it. Yeah, Yamato called me and told me about that. He was really pissed too. Thing is, I think that's exactly what this guy was hoping you'd do. What? Naruto asked him with a humorous expression. Jiraiya clarified that he was being evasive once more. He was hoping you'd do something that would force the cops to stop chasing after you, she said. If this guy was trying to take us out, why in the hell wouldn't he want the cops chase us? Was one of Jiraiya's lines of reasoning that Naruto detested at times. Based on what he's done, I don't think this guy wants you all taken down. If it were that simple, he would have just killed you already. Sounds like what he wants is your jobs, and it'll be a lot easier to get them if the cops aren't around, Jiraiya said, clearly stating his intentions for once. That actually makes a lot of sense, Naruto had to concede, acknowledging that this didn't sound like someone seeking retribution. If payback was what they wanted, then the phone call really wouldn't have made any sense. You're dealing with someone who's extremely smart, Jiraiya said, clearly seeing that he had it all figured out. He has a significant plan in the works if this is his first step. That sounded pretty unpleasant to Naruto. So what do we do? How do I instruct the 9 kings? The best thing you guys can do right now is stick together, was the only thing Jiraiya could think of to say to them. I can't emphasize that enough. It's all over if you start fighting with each other. I think you're right, but some of the kings won't make that easy, Naruto said, recognizing what he was referring to. I can tell you now that Yugito and Yugura will be an issue. Utakata doesn't particularly like Han, and those 2 don't trust anyone. You wouldn't have to worry about all this if you kept better company, Jiraiya said, finishing his ramen and setting it aside. With a slight scowl, Naruto said to Jiraiya, will you just let it go for the time being? Jiraiya addressed him somewhat forcefully, okay, but I'm not going to sleep until I've got you on my side. As he finished his final bite, Naruto said, whatever you say, Grandpa. I hope you weren't trying to insult me when you said that, Jiraiya remarked, smiling gently at the child. I adore it, if we are being truthful. Despite his best efforts, Naruto couldn't help but smile, saying, whatever, you want to watch a movie or something? Sounds great, Jiraiya said, not understanding why not. Let's go look for something worthwhile. Since the meeting with the 9 kings, Han had been busy covering his ass, Because of that dreadful call, he was currently unable to sell any stolen art he owned because everyone had heard about Naruto being called in and questioned about the artwork, which was all it took to keep people from touching anything he owned. His regular clients interpreted the questioning as an indication that the police were observing him, which made it nearly impossible to sell anything. Han was currently attempting to reassure one of his clients over the phone at his apartment, saying, "I'm telling you, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, this is just a minor storm that will pass, and then I will give you the item." Han appeared relieved when he heard some sort of response from the other side. "That's great, thank you so much, Sai," he said. "I guarantee that we will soon have a contract." Deidara said, "Sorry you have to deal with all this, man. I know it's gotta suck," observing that his employer was currently in a lot of trouble. "Suck doesn't begin to cover it," Han said. "I've got a decent amount of cash saved up, so hopefully I won't have to go crawling to Kakuzu for a loan." Trying to comfort him, Deidara said, "At least it really couldn't get much worse." After hearing a knock on the door, Han said, "I hope you're right, because I really don't feel like putting up with any more of this." When he opened the door, he was confronted by a furious man who said, "May I assist you, sir?" "Yeah, you can explain to me why my art's not hanging up in a museum and getting the recognition it deserves," the man said, slipping by Han and beginning to survey his apartment. Already feeling uneasy about this, Han said, "Look, whoever you are, I really don't know what you're talking about." "The name is Otoko, and don't you dare bullshit me," the man said, turning to face Han. "My painting was stolen before it could be displayed in the museum, and I know it was you." "So, Otoko, do you have any proof that I stole your painting?" Han asked, sensing that this was not going to go well. "I got a call from a guy who wouldn't give his name, and he told me you have something that belongs to me," Otoko said, directly in Han's face. "Until you tell me where my painting is, I won't be going, and if you're not quick, I'll contact the police." "This is my home," Han said, pushing the man away. "I'll throw your ass out of here if I want to." "Even if you throw me out, you won't be able to throw out the entire Konoha Police Department." Otoko was not accepting no for an answer. Han had only one option. "I suppose you've given me no other option. Remember that I didn't want things to turn out this way." "Hey now, I didn't mean to offend," Otoko said, suddenly realizing how much bigger Han was than him. Han reached down and removed the phone from Otoko, saying, "At least he's not bleeding." Otoko didn't complete the sentence because Han had already given him a strong slap in the lips and then a heavier slap on his temple, so it was obvious that he wouldn't be waking up for a while. "I don't have to clean anything up because of that." "So what do you want to do with him?" Deidara asked, glancing at the unconscious artist. That was exactly what Han had been considering. Kill him, but don't do it here. Find a method to ensure that the body won't be discovered. Deidara asked, "What are you going to do with that?" in an attempt to understand why he had taken the phone. "Give it to Naruto so that he can give it to his people," said Han, putting it in his pocket. "According to Mr. Artist, he received a call informing him that I had his painting. If he was actually called, Naruto can probably figure out who it was. I'm going to appear really suspicious, so I'm hoping he can at least." That was something Deidara hadn't considered. This guy really seems to want to fuck with you. "Let's just hope my friend believes me about all this," said Han, who had already pulled out his own phone. "Enjoy the body." It was already in motion when Deidara said, "I'm going to turn this third-rate hack into true art." "I was aware of it," as Han concluded his story to the other kings. Yugito said, "You're playing us like some cheap violin." Naruto had intended to gather the kings as soon as Han had summoned him, and he believed that this was the next step for whoever was pursuing them. Han wasn't pleased because Yugito believed it to be something completely different. "What do I stand to gain from this? My financial flow will be non-existent if this nonsense continues. Will you try to reason with her, Naruto?" "He's right, Yugito, there's nothing he gains from this." Fu was in the same situation as Naruto, but with her uncle Kakuzu, and he had no intention of jumping into this heap of dung. Naruto had just arrived because of his appointment with Jiraiya. Yagura interrupted Naruto to say, "I wouldn't be so quick to say that," adding that the value of an artist's work skyrockets after they pass away. "How can we be certain that Han didn't fabricate this in order to murder Otoko and obtain more money for his painting?" "I wouldn't do something like that," said Han, insulted. "We all agreed that the 9 kings shouldn't be troubled by needless deaths. Perhaps this is just a charade to allow you to murder him without being held accountable by your fellow kings?" Utakata proposed. "After everything I've done for you people, you're going to turn on me at the slightest hint of trouble?" Han asked, his voice sounding like steam threatening to escape his ears. "I'm shocked by you jerks." Fu stood by Han's side, saying, "Are you all aware of how insane you sound? Han wouldn't do any of this for a little additional money. He wasn't particularly in need of money. In fact, he didn't begin to lose it until all of this began. He wouldn't be able to replace the money he lost with the additional revenue from the painting." And Yugito remained unconvinced, saying, "Maybe he's just an idiot." "Why you stuck up little?" Han said, clenching his fist bitterly. Yugito's statement, "Damn it Yugito, there's no reason to talk like that," shocked Naruto. "You Takata, Yagura, and you have no reason to doubt Han. These accusations are absurd. After Otoko called me, I asked Han to bring his phone to Shikamaru. Can you guess what Shikamaru discovered? Since Otoko received a call from a prepaid cell phone, we are unable to follow it. That didn't seem important to you Takata, who said, so what? A few drug users' phones made the initial call. Why would Han call Otoko and have the man come to his apartment if he intended to kill him? Naruto thought. He could just kill him and dispose of the body so that we'd never even know he killed the guy. Rapped by B. Hey yo, I'm with Naruto on this. Gaara also recognized the reasoning behind it, saying, everything you're accusing Han of is illogical. Before speaking, you should all give this further thought. Well, Naruto, why do you think this guy switched from using other people's phones to just using a prepaid? Yagura said, deciding they'd better just go on. Because we couldn't have found a prepaid phone. Naruto was fairly certain he had an answer for that as well. He wants us to know that he is pursuing us. To make us weak, he wants us to fight and be afraid of one another. He will simply wait until we are at our weakest before turning us into his bitch if we are not careful. Now, everyone, return to your folks and ensure that everything you own is safe. I have a feeling that things will only get worse from here. Everyone appeared to be intently observing one another, but they all went to follow Naruto's instructions. Only Fu approached Naruto, carrying a suitcase over her shoulder, and asked, are you prepared to take me to your place? Remember, you have to make me hungry so I'll eat the breakfast you promised? Feeling shaky, Naruto exclaimed, man, you're awesome. Kakashi pays close attention to everything Naruto says to him on the phone. Naruto phoned Kakashi to update him on the events following the most amazing night of his life and a delectable breakfast. He claimed that the call Otoko had received was too brief for Shikamaru to attempt to track, meaning that they were unable to determine not just who had called but also where the call originated. They essentially still had nothing. Great, so we're still chasing our own tail, he said, leaning back in his chair. As Naruto himself phrased it, more or less, yeah. I don't know if Jiraiya called you and filled you in on what we talked about. Nothing could be more accurate. Jiraiya and I still don't really talk all that often. He still hasn't forgiven me for. Well, you know, Kakashi told him. Naruto simply said, oh come on, if I could forgive you, then anyone should be able to. He had no idea what that meant. Jiraiya still thinks you couldn't have formed the 9 kings without me, Kakashi said, wishing it were that easy. On that one, Naruto could somewhat understand Jiraiya's point of view. There is a little truth to that, but it was my choice in the end. He can't blame you for helping me. He can and he does, replied Kakashi, but that's not the issue right now. What we need to worry about is finding out who's gunning for your job. So why don't you fill me in on everything you and Jiraiya talked about? Naruto delivered Kakashi the condensed version of what Jiraiya had said after making an effort to recall everything. I guess none of that really helps you figure out who we're looking, does it? Kakashi said, acknowledging that he had little to work with. Kind of hard to find a guy when the only clue we has is that he's a doctor. I'm gonna need some to figure this out, said Kakashi, who was beginning to lose his temper. Hopefully she doesn't give you too much of a hard time. Naruto knew who he was referring to. Yeah, hopefully. Kakashi sighed deeply. Wish me luck. Looks like it's time for me to go and clean up your mess. Knowing that Kakashi would never turn down an opportunity to show off his skills, Naruto said, very funny Kakashi. Good luck. After Kakashi ended the call, a woman passed by him. She wore black suit pants and a suit jacket, had brown hair that matched her eyes, and 2 purple rectangles on her cheeks that no one had ever dared to question. One of the detectives who Konoha feared the most was Rin Nohara. As though he was just getting to know her, Kakashi approached her shyly and said, hey Rin. Rin didn't even glance at him when she sat down at her desk. She greeted him with the single word, Kakashi. So you're still mad at me huh? Asked Kakashi, who cringed at her lack of emotion. Pulling out some documents, Rin started going through them, saying, it was 4 years ago, Kakashi, I'm not mad anymore. I've just decided that we should just be coworkers, nothing more. Kakashi sighed. We used to be so close Rin. You, me, Obito, and Captain Namikaze had the highest case closer rate in the history of the precinct. That was then Kakashi, and this is now. The captain is dead, Obito was stripped of his rank, and you did something that was basically spitting on Minato's grave, Rin said, continuing to tamper with her paperwork. I can't deny that everything you just said is true, so I won't try to. I'll just tell that I need your help, Kakashi began to clarify. What did you do? Rin said, casting a skeptical glance up at him. So that no one could hear, Kakashi moved closer to her and murmured, I didn't do anything. It's Naruto, he and some of his friends need our help. Are you talking about the friends I think you're talking about? He said, perhaps capturing Rin's interest at last. Kakashi was relieved that she was already aware of the kings. This was simple. Yes, I am. Someone's causing a lot of trouble for them, and if it keeps up, Naruto could end up in prison. Or worse, dead. She cared too much about Naruto to say anything. What do you need? Rin didn't need to hear any more. Wow, that was fast, said Kakashi. If it's to help Naruto, then I'm in. The fact that you've been protecting him all this time is the only reason I'm even still willing to talk to you, Rin said, getting up and putting away her papers. Let me fill you in on everything we've got so far. Just gonna warn you now, it's not a lot. Kakashi could live with that. While putting on her coat, Rin listened to Kakashi's brief account and said, you weren't kidding. You've really got your work out for you. Actually, I guess it's more like we've got our work cut out for us. I think the best place to start is with Han. Kakashi became somewhat defensive and said, don't tell me you two believe Han is a traitor? No, I don't think he's a traitor, Rin said, realizing she wanted to clarify. However, I believe that someone who works for the Nine Kings is based on what you told me. Someone must be getting paid by this doctor for information. It appears likely that one of Han's men is responsible for this since he is the only one who has been attacked thus far. Well, I guess we'll go and see Han first then, said Kakashi, who was growing increasingly happy that he had asked Rin for assistance. Hey, what are you guys talking about? Yamato said to a tall man with black bowl-cut hair and a bright green suit. We've got a small lead on the stolen art, Kakashi lied quickly. Rin and I decided to go investigate since our precinct still has authority. When Yamato heard that, he became ecstatic and said, take me with you. That's a negative, Yamato. You won't be going anywhere near where we are, Kakashi said, preventing him from doing so. You were prohibited from doing anything that could even remotely be related to Naruto since Kurenai made that complaint. If you accompanied us, the department would be in hot water and you would lose your job. Despite his strenuous attempts to dispute, Yamato realized that Kakashi was correct when he said, you guys better not miss anything. Yamato, we've got so much more experience with this stuff that it would make your head spin, Rin said, ignoring Kakashi's next words. Don't try to tell us what to do, we're more qualified for this than you are. With a stunned expression, Yamato said, sorry, I wasn't trying to offend you. It's okay, Yamato, you just stay here with Guy and work on something else. Kakashi had to force himself not to chuckle. Yosh, Kakashi is right, said Guy, the man in the green suit. Let me show you how a real detective does an investigation, young Yamato. Quote. To avoid upsetting Guy, Yamato remained silent despite his skepticism. All well, I suppose. What could possibly go wrong? Quote. He has no idea what he's in for, Kakashi said, feeling a little sorry, as the two of them left. With a laugh, Rin said, no, he really doesn't. Kakashi was relieved that her mood had improved. Are you prepared to leave now? Quote. Rin instantly recalled who she was speaking to and returned to her icy manner, saying, yeah, let's go. Kakashi fervently hoped that he might restore things to their previous state, at least in part. A flashback to 24 years ago. 24 years ago, the process of becoming a police officer was much simpler. You just had to complete 2 years of academy training and then take the exam to become a police officer. This is exactly what 21-year-old Kakashi Hatake, who was following in his father's footsteps, had done. His father had a history of blowing up a large undercover operation and killing half a dozen people before he went into a deep depression and ultimately committed suicide. Kakashi vowed to join the police force and redeem the Hatake name. He worked for a department legend, Minato Namikaze, who was just 35 years old but had Konoha's criminal underworld shivering in its boots. Minato was known as the Yellow Flash, due to his blonde hair and the speed at which he was able to seal a case. In addition to working under Minato, he usually worked with 2 other people, Rin Nohara, a girl who was out to prove that a woman could become a successful detective, and Obito Uchiha, a young man who had chosen to join law enforcement rather than become a businessman like the rest of his family. Obito kept asking Rin out, but she didn't love him that way, and Rin had once asked Kakashi out, but he didn't really think about Rin that way. It was a little depressing, but that was the way things were. They were all eating at their favorite cafe while listening to Minato tell them everything about Naruto, his new little bundle of joy. He's adorable. Minato had taken the three of them under his wing and was trying his best to help them navigate all the pitfalls of being a cop. The little child received his mother's face, but he got my hair and my blue eyes. She's much more attractive than I am, so thank God for that. He's so little, too, man. For heaven's sake, I was terrified that I would shatter him. Rin let out a happy squeak. Oh, he sounds so adorable. When are we able to meet him? Quote. After you're all done with your shifts and I've finished looking into the Fugaku case, then we can head over to the house and visit with Naruto and Kushina, Minato stated, taking a drink of his coffee. That sounded good to Obito, who thought, this is going to be fantastic. So, how is the case of my cousin progressing? Quote. Since the Uchiha and his cousin had been close, Minato was aware that Fugaku's passing had been especially traumatic for Obito. Like you, I don't buy that he killed himself, Minato said. Unlike most suicides, Fugaku was shot through the heart. The majority of people would have placed the gun barrel against their temple or in their mouth. Although it's quite uncommon, some folks will definitely shoot for the heart. Furthermore, the suicide letter didn't sound anything like Fugaku, according to Obito. It simply doesn't make sense. Why Grandpa Madara was so certain that it was a suicide is beyond me. Obito said, Fugaku just wasn't that type of guy, but then he became agitated and said, sorry, I'm rambling here. I will definitely stop by to see the baby. You're going to come too, right Kakashi? Rin said, grabbing Kakashi's arm. Quote. In order to avoid being the odd one out, Kakashi said, sure, I've got nothing better to do. Minato motioned for the waitress to pay for everything. In that case, I'll see you guys later tonight at my place, he remarked. Hey, can you hang back for a second? Minato requested Kakashi as they all stood up to depart. I would like to discuss things with you. After observing the other two depart, Kakashi went to Minato and asked, did I make a mistake? Quote. No, nothing like that, said Minato. Kushina and I were just thinking about who we wanted to be Naruto's godfather. With a slight sense of relief, Kakashi said, oh, well, who were you thinking? Perhaps Jiraiya. Quote. Minato was aware that his initial reaction was, no, Jiraiya is too old to be a parent. We had a younger person in mind. Someone we've grown to consider family. Kakashi simply continued to speculate, is it Rin? Quote. Knowing he wouldn't understand, Minato said, let me get right to the point. We were hoped you would agree to be Naruto's godfather, you see, Kakashi. Me, of all the fucking people on earth, why me? Kakashi said, almost passing out. Quote. His response, Minato suspected, would be, because we trust you. You understand how difficult it is to be alone because you spent the majority of your childhood without parents. You would never allow someone else to experience that. Breathing heavily, Kakashi said, are you certain about this? Quote. With certainty, Minato said, Kushina and I already have you marked as who gets custody of him if, God forbid, both of us die. Unsure of what to say, Kakashi said, I'm, honored I guess. Actually, I don't. Minato placed a hand on Kakashi's shoulder and said, for the time being, let's not worry about it. I'll see you tonight, just head to work. He was working with two people he could call his friends, and everything was going well for him. Kakashi just watched all of his friends go, and it was all so weird to him. Minato had trusted him with his son's life. End of flashback. The past was the past, and Kakashi was going to have to make do with what he had now. To be honest, he had built a pretty decent life for himself, so now all he could do was try to keep what he had. That was a long time ago, and everything seemed to be perfect then, but it hadn't lasted long. Kakashi wished fervently that he could just go back in time to that day because there were so many things he could change and prevent, but that was simply not possible. They arrived at Han's apartment quickly because the man lived close to the precinct. Rin was waiting for Kakashi in the car because he was supposed to go and get a list of all Han's employees and their locations well, not all of them, just the ones who knew enough to betray Han. As she waited, Rin thought about Kakashi. She had considered forgiving him numerous times, but it was difficult. Each time she considered what he had done, she wanted to slap him. Nevertheless, he had made a lot of effort to atone for his transgression, so perhaps it was time for her to allow Kakashi back into her life. Damn it, Kakashi, don't scare me like that. Rin jumped a little when Kakashi opened the driver's side door since she had been so absorbed in her thoughts. I apologize, I wasn't trying to frighten you, Kakashi said, setting down a little notebook. It was remarkably easy for him to give up the names. I assume that he is eager to have this resolved so that he can resume earning money. There aren't many people on this list, Rin said, picking up the notepad and looking at the names. Just 4 or 5 of them, maybe. Han trusts very few people. You kind of have to, considering his line of work. Kakashi had anticipated this. Rin figured she shouldn't be upset. I guess that just means we've just got less work to do. By the way, why does he always wear that big red hat and the mask? Doesn't the red suit make him stand out enough? No one ever asks you about the purple marks on your cheeks. His fashion choices aren't my concern, said Kakashi, who didn't see the point. Rin recognized what he was saying. Well, I suppose I'll let it go for the time being. I hope this can be resolved quickly so Naruto won't have to worry about anything. That would be the best case scenario, Kakashi said, expressing the same hope. The most essential thing to me is keeping Naruto safe. Yeah, now it is, Rin said without restraint. Unfortunately, when Naruto first required that philosophy, you didn't have it. Since there was nothing he could say that would help him feel any better at this point, Kakashi had to confess that one hurt. He simply sighed and turned on the car, and as he returned to the road, his thoughts began to slowly stray into the past. A flashback to 24 years ago. As planned, Kakashi, Rin, and Obito accompanied Minato to visit his newborn son, and Kushina was delighted to have them over. Kushina loved entertaining, and as soon as she learned that people were coming over, she began preparing a huge meal. Despite having a small infant around, Kushina somehow managed to make roast, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, and gravy. Minato had truly married a wonderful woman. They immediately began seeing Naruto after finishing the incredibly excellent lunch. Kushina's voice was full of joy as she led them to the nursery, saying, "Oh, wait till you see this little guy. I want to warn you all that his father is the only one he has let to hold him for extended periods of time thus far. So far, he seems to prefer girls. Must be a breast man, like his father," Kakashi mumbled. Rin gave him a backhand to the head and said, "Very funny, Kakashi." "Ah, he just woke up," Kushina said as she approached Naruto's cot and lifted him up. "His eyes and everything else are visible." Rin was impatient and said, "Oh, may I hold him? Please, please, please." Quote. Despite her reluctance, Kushina gave Naruto to Rin, saying, "Take a look at those eyes. They are enormous and azure. I've never seen a newborn with that much hair." Obito thought the child was adorable as well, saying, "He looks exactly like you guys, doesn't he?" Quote. Minato approached Rin from behind and gave his kid a tender glance before saying, "Yeah, he really got the best of both us." In Rin's arms, Naruto made little sounds, asking, "Are you speaking to me? Your small voice is very adorable." In an attempt to hold him, Obito said, "Come on Rin, don't hog him all to yourself." Rin pretended to give him to Obito before turning to giving him to Kakashi and saying, "Here you go, Kakashi." After everyone had finished laughing, Obito smirked and said, "Come on Rin, you're such a tease." "Yeah, that's me," Rin said, sticking her tongue out at him. An enormous tease. Kakashi's nervousness made it obvious that he had no idea what he was doing. Am I doing this right?" Quote. Kushina stepped over to assist Naruto after he began to fuss, saying, "You've got to support his head a little more, like this." When she shifted Kakashi's arm so that Naruto's head was higher up, the baby began to relax a little and said, "Thanks Kushina." Kushina stroked Naruto's tiny head and said, "Kakashi, you must maintain your composure. Babies become anxious because they can sense when you're anxious." Everyone looked up from the infant when they saw Obito's phone range and said, "Sorry guys, it's my grandfather. I must answer this call." They all turned to face Naruto as he moved to the corner and answered his phone, but then they heard Obito say, "Grandpa, what the heck are you talking about? You can't be saying, 'Look, I'm not going to. Would you give me a moment to speak?'" Quote. Rin turned to the others and said, "I'm going to go and see what's wrong," but Obito left the room since he could tell he was becoming noisy. Naruto and you two remain here. Still a little uneasy about holding Naruto in his arms, Kakashi watched them go. Kushina saw that Minato was holding something beneath his arm and said, "What's that, sweetie?" Quote, "I'm not sure," Minato said, pulling it up and examining it. "When we arrived home, it was on the front porch. It doesn't have a return address or anything. I don't know who sent it. He's probably just hungry," Kushina remarked Kakashi when Naruto began to fuss once more. "You ought to go get him a bottle of breast milk that I have in the refrigerator." As Kushina left, Kakashi heard Minato inquire, "So, do you think I should open it?" Quote, he was about to ask them a question when he heard a tiny explosion and was sent backwards, colliding with a wall. His face felt like it was burning terrible and he was only able to open one eye. Kakashi couldn't hear anything because of the explosion, which must have temporarily damaged his eardrums, but Rin and Obito ran inside and were yelling about something when he heard them. The last thing Kakashi saw before he passed out was Rin picking up Naruto, who didn't appear to be in great shape either, and after feeling Rin desperately dabbing his face with a towel, Obito ran into the nursery, which was on fire from the explosion, which was obviously caused by the package, but that was all he could make out. The end of the flashback. That day, Kakashi lost more than one eye. The package contained a pipe bomb that instantly killed both Minato and Kushina. Law enforcement had never been able to identify the sender because there had been no return address and no one had seen who had left the package. Almost every criminal in Konoha had an incentive to kill him, so they left with more leads than they could follow. After that day, nobody was the same, but Obito had the most difficult time. Apparently, his grandfather had called to tell him not to investigate his cousin's death any further, thus Fugaku's death had to stay a mystery, along with Minato's. Although Kakashi had always been troubled by the fact that Minato's killer had never been apprehended, he needed to put Naruto's safety ahead of his father's punishment. After locating Han's men, Kakashi and Rin soon learned how secretive the men were before they could ask a single question. The two detectives had to demonstrate that Han trusted Tama and, after practically prying their lips open, they learned that all of the men were fiercely loyal to Han, and that if any of them wanted to betray their boss, they were very good at hiding it. Rin decided to look into their finances after speaking with them and finding nothing unusual about any of the names Han had given them. None of them showed any indication of having a lot of money. In fact, none of them showed any indication of having any money at all, and like their leader, they appeared to be losing a lot of money as a result of this whole situation. "This just doesn't make any sense," Rin said, appearing fairly bewildered by everything they had acquired as Kakashi and Rin sat in the car. These individuals were the only ones who were aware of Han's business. Quote, "One of the other kings," was the only response Kakashi could come up with. However, none of them seemed to have any need to do this, in my opinion. There's no reason to tamper with their ideal setup. Quote, Rin attempted to formulate yet another theory. Perhaps one of the other kings unintentionally disclosed information regarding Han's business. They would avoid all suspicion if they made it appear that the leak occurred in the organization of another king. "Jiraiya did say that we were dealing with someone who's incredibly smart," Kakashi said. "If that's true then a move like that is right up his alley. Let's assume that we're right and it is another king's employee," Rin continued to wonder. "How can we identify the person?" Quote, "Why don't we see if Naruto will let us talk to the other kings?" was Kakashi's extremely bold proposal. "It's the best lead we have, but I know that if we prove that one of the 9 king's men is a traitor, they will all be pissed." Even though it was a hazardous proposal, Rin thought it was fantastic. "That means we get to go and visit Naruto, right?" Quote, Kakashi simply shrugged, not understanding why she appeared so enthusiastic, saying, "Yeah, so what?" Quote, with a slight scowl, Rin said, "You may get to visit Naruto all the time, but I don't." Kakashi still didn't understand. "You might have seen him yesterday when he was at the precinct. Hell, you could come see him at any time. Why don't you simply go speak with him?" Quote, "I'm not friends with him like you are," Rin said, gazing out the window with a dejected expression. "It is weird to visit him because he hardly knows me at all. It didn't work out the first time I visited his residence. I tried discussing his father at first, but he wasn't too fond of it. I tried discussing work with him after that, but I suppose he wasn't that interested. We simply ran out of interesting topics to discuss. I made the decision to let him come to me instead of attempting to go to him after that." "There's no need for that," Kakashi said, knowing what he had to do. "Simply put, you're not speaking to him properly. I'll demonstrate what to say when we get at his apartment. You have to talk to him a certain way. Rin asked, appearing quite interested. Quote. Kakashi began to explain to her that he's not very good at trusting people, adding that you've said small things to let him know that you're not there to criticize or try to alter him. He feels as though you're trying to save him or something when you talk about Minato and the department. One issue with that, according to Rin, was, but what about Jiraiya? He tells me everything about his desire to attempt to save Naruto whenever we speak. At first, Naruto just put up with that because he needed Jiraiya's help, Kakashi could readily explain. Eventually, they were so close that Jiraiya's persistent nagging didn't bother Naruto. With a somewhat optimistic expression, Rin said, maybe he and I can get that close. You could have been that close to him a long time ago if you'd come to me about it, Kakashi said. With her arms crossed, Rin said, you know why I couldn't see you. Desperately, Kakashi informed her, Rin, that was a long time ago. Since then, I've evolved. At the very least, allow me to introduce myself. I'm not saying that we have to become friends immediately. Well, I guess it couldn't hurt to give you a shot, Rin thought, thinking about how lonely she had been without Kakashi and Naruto in her life, and then there was Obito, who hadn't spoken to her in years and she probably wouldn't see him again anytime soon. Just keep in mind, if I'm not happy with what I uncover. She didn't have to finish because Kakashi said, all right, I understand. So, are you prepared to visit Naruto? Quote. Rin grinned broadly and said, yes, please, get the car started right away. Quote. You couldn't see it through his mask, but Kakashi was also grinning, happy that he was bringing Rin into Naruto's life because Rin loved the blonde so much and she deserved to know Hima far more than Kakashi did, given what he'd done. Rewind. Following the explosion, Kakashi and Naruto were taken to the hospital, where they both needed urgent medical attention due to the extensive damage they had sustained. Kakashi's face was severely disfigured, with the left half of it half torn off by the bomb and burned by the flames. Despite the efforts of the doctors, the left half of his face was probably never going to look the same again. According to what Kakashi knew about Naruto, the poor infant was undergoing surgery at the moment and would be touched and carried around for some time. The doctors weren't even certain that he would live, and Kakashi wasn't sure if he was more terrified of Naruto dying or of him surviving. Kakashi would be the child's guardian if Naruto survived. The thought of being a parent terrified Kakashi to no end. He knew he would be a bad father and could not possibly nurture a child. What would he do if Naruto survived? He was not a monster, so of course he wanted Naruto to live. If he did, he would need to find something to do with the child, and perhaps Rin would be willing to raise him. But who was he to ask her to do that? She had her own life to live, so what in hell was he going to do? A doctor entered the room while he was attempting to process everything. Excuse me, are you Kakashi Hatake? Quote. Talking while wearing bandages, Kakashi found it difficult to remark, that's what it says on my charts. I'm glad we found you so easily, the doctor said, glancing at a clipboard he was holding. Thus, Naruto's health has significantly improved. It becomes increasingly likely that he will live. Have you told anyone else about this yet? Asked Kakashi, feeling both relieved and terrified. Quote. With a shake of his head, the doctor said, no, I came to you first. All right, until you are certain that Naruto will live, please don't tell anyone about him. Kakashi was honest with him, saying, I don't want to raise their expectations. I've seen many families get their hearts broken after the best case scenario didn't pan out, the doctor said, recognizing the logic in that. Until all is known, I will keep this a secret. The silver-haired guy was only thinking about how Naruto deserved so much better than himself, and that anyone would be a better father than him. Kakashi thanked the doctor and watched him go. Kakashi had a crazy notion at that point, and after searching around until he eventually located his cell phone in his coat pocket, thank goodness Rin had given his old clothes back to Hima, he began to dial and held the phone up to his ear, saying, Hey Genma, it's Kakashi. Remember the favor you owe me, don't you? I'm going to call it in, though. I'll email you some papers and ask you to play around with them. Just follow my instructions without question. It will be providing you with really detailed instructions. With meticulous attention to detail, Kakashi gave Genma the clearest instructions possible, and Genma quickly understood what he was asking him to do. Are you saying you want to get a phony death certificate for a newborn? Quote. That sounded vicious, and Kakashi detested it. That's about the size of it, yes. Genma never thought Kakashi would do this. First, whose child is this? And second, what are you doing? Quote. It seemed as though Kakashi was explaining the entire situation to himself as well. Don't worry about whose child it is. Let's just state that the child would benefit more from being raised by foster parents is the reason for my actions. Oh, does the father in the photo have a terrible attitude? Genma questioned him. You pretty much hit the nail on the head, was the best way Kakashi could think of to describe it. Will you do it then? Quote. Genma was more than happy to say, I owe you a favor, as you mentioned. Let's discuss later, I'll get to work on it. Kakashi said, yeah, talk to you later. Thanks again, and hung up. Even though what Kakashi was about to do was against the law, crazy, and possibly even morally dubious, he believed it was the best course of action for Naruto. He only prayed that he was correct. Page break. So how do I start up a conversation with him? Oh, and what do we talk about? Oh, and, Rin asked as soon as Kakashi pulled into the parking lot of Naruto's apartment complex. Kakashi abruptly interrupted her. Calm down Rin, you'll freak him out if you get too nervous. All you have to do is ask him about his girlfriend and listen. Hell, as long as you ask him about anything but his father and his job, you're golden. Trust me Rin, just be yourself and he'll love you. I hope you're right, so do we need a game plan or do we just head in? Rin asked with a tense smile. No need to overthink it, we're just gonna head in, Kakashi said, rolling his eyes. Rin inhaled deeply before saying, all right, let's go. After exiting the vehicle, the two of them made their way to the flat. Naruto answered the door when Kakashi knocked, saying, hey Kakashi, what's up man? Oh, hello to you too Rin. Hey Naruto, we've been looking into what happened with Han and only one theory we've got seems to make any sense, Rin remarked, noticing that he didn't sound as thrilled when he spoke her name. At that, Naruto became somewhat amiable and said, well then come on in, tell me what you guys got. They entered together and briefly summarized their findings to Naruto. You want me to tell the kings that one of them has a traitor in their organization? He asked, feeling his stomach turn as they continued their conversation. Kakashi acknowledged that he would be anxious, saying, yes, we do. Unless you can think of some other way to figure out who's leaking information, it's the best option. Naruto was aware that there were no other choices. I hate it when you're right. The thing is, I don't know if I want to get us all together 3 days in a row. That'd look suspicious to any outsiders. I'll send out a group text saying that one of the 9 kings' operation has been compromised. If I say that it could even be my people, it might just keep the others from getting too pissed off. Smart move. Given your current situation, it's the best solution. Rin saw no problems with that. Naruto texted, I'm glad you approve. Was there anything else you guys needed? There's nothing else that we need at the moment. We've got some extra time though, so I thought we might talk for a bit. Rin was aware that this was the right moment for her to get closer to Naruto. What did you want to talk about? Naruto asked, looking at her anxiously. Kakashi mentioned that you're seeing someone. Why don't you tell me about her? Rin said, following the first thought that sprang to mind. It's actually another one of the kings and her name is Fu. She has this crazy green hair that everyone thinks is fake, but trust me, the carpet matches the drapes, Naruto said, beaming with pleasure. Rin chuckled and blushed slightly, saying, that's a little more than I needed to know, but go on. Naruto began to ramble, well, she's smart, funny, and drop-dead gorgeous. She's actually from a small town not far from here. Rin's efforts to get Naruto to open up to her somewhat pleased Kakashi. The fact that the people in his life were beginning to reunite pleased him. Life in Kakashi was collapsing 4 years ago, but it was now beginning to be rebuilt. All he needed to do now was avoid making the same mistakes he had made in the past. Rewind. 4 years ago. 20 years had passed since the deaths of Minato and Kushina, and Kakashi's life had undergone significant upheaval. He now donned an eye patch to conceal his now destroyed left eye and a mask to conceal the damage to his face. The only time he ever removed the mask was to properly wash his face in the shower. Although few people were aware of the exact circumstances of that day, Obito was dismissed from the police department almost 2 years prior for injuring a suspect while they were being questioned. All Kakashi and Rin would ever say when someone inquired about the interrogation was, he was doing what he believed he had to do. Only they knew the truth. Now that they were detectives, Kakashi and Rin possessed the precinct's greatest case-closing rate. Rin must have worn him down over the years, for things had become a little romantic between them, and Kakashi was even thinking about asking her out. There was really nothing for Kakashi to be upset about at the moment. Sometimes, when he thought of Naruto, he sincerely hoped that the boy's life was going as well as his. 20 years had passed since Kakashi had placed Naruto in foster care after declaring him dead. The easiest step was having Genma falsify the documents. The difficult part was actually getting him out of the hospital and convincing everyone that he was dead. However, Kakashi was able to pull it off somehow. He had considered finding Naruto a couple of times, but it didn't seem like a smart idea. Kakashi believed Naruto would be better off without him, which is why he had done all of this. Kakashi would live his own life, and Naruto would live his. The two of them would never come into contact. At least it was Kakashi's assumption. For the most part, Kakashi's morning had been quite ordinary. He made a few calls, typed up some reports, and once got up to grab a donut and coffee. Before Rin hastily came up his desk and exclaimed, "Kakashi, you're not gonna believe this." Everything was going smoothly. "What's the big deal, Rin? You look like you've seen a ghost or something," said Kakashi, setting down his coffee and raising an eyebrow. Rin said, "That's just it, Kakashi. If I didn't know any better, I'd say I just saw Minato." Kakashi asked, "What are you talking about?" As his blood ran cold. "They just pulled in a kid off the street who was about 20 years old. Apparently he was trying to steal some food from a gas station, and he looks just like a younger version of Minato," Rin said, pointing to the holding cell in the precinct's corner. The age was simply reiterated by Kakashi. 20, he's 20 years old. Rin spoke aloud, "That's how old Minato's son would be, the kid's name is even Naruto. I guess it's just wishful thinking that it could be him, huh?" Kakashi nodded swiftly, "Yeah, it's wishful thinking. There's gotta be a dozen Narutos running around in this city. Maybe he's distantly related to Minato and it's just a family name." After giving it some thought, Rin said, I guess that could be it. I know it couldn't be that Naruto, I saw the death certificate myself." It was difficult for Kakashi to ask, so did he say anything? "When I walked by he asked me why everyone was joking around and calling him Minato," Rin recounted, not realizing how anxious Kakashi was. "I told him who Minato was and that he looked just like him. After that he asked if Minato ever had a son. He's a foster kid who doesn't even know his last name, so I think he was hoping maybe Minato was his dad or something. Of course I had to break it to him that Minato's only son was dead. Once he heard that he just kind of got real quiet and backed the other 8 people in his cell. 9 people in one holding cell. Must be a busy dia when you told him who Minato was. Did you tell him about us?" Kakashi asked, somewhat amazed. The reason for his question was unclear to Rin, who said, "You were the original Naruto's godfather, you definitely came up in the conversation." In an attempt to avoid coming over as irate, Kakashi said, "Why did you talk to this guy anyways? He's just some random thief with no family." Rin let out a gasp, "Well, excuse me for being nice for some poor kid who was stealing so that he wouldn't starve to death." After waiting for her to depart, Kakashi crept past the holding cell. He only got close enough to verify that Naruto was indeed in the cell in order to prevent the child from seeing him. Kakashi recognized Naruto as soon as he saw his face, hair, and those intense blue eyes. "Hey, are you that Kakashi guy the girl was talking about?" Naruto called, indicating that Kakashi hadn't done a good enough job of remaining out of sight. Even though Kakashi's skin began to crawl immediately, he approached the cell's bars and said, "I'm Detective Hitaki, is there something you need?" After giving Kakashi a close inspection, Naruto asked, "So you were supposed to be my godfather?" "Sorry, but the only person I've ever been a godfather for is Naruto Namikaze," said Kakashi, who could feel his perspiration beginning. "Do you think I'm stupid, Kakashi?" Naruto asked him. "I'm not like your friend who won't admit to herself that you did something terrible." "Now you listen here, I have no idea what you're talking about," Kakashi said, leaning in close to him. "I'm going to ask you this once and only once. Don't lie to me because I'll be able to tell. Was Minato Namikaze my father and were you supposed to be my godfather?" Kakashi murmured as Naruto grabbed his shirt, but he didn't yell to make sure no one saw them. Kakashi had his gaze fixed on him. He was simply unable to lie. "Yes, both of the things you just said are true. When your parents were killed you were horribly injured. I was supposed to become your father, but I knew nothing about raising a child. So, I had a friend mix some stuff around so that you were declared dead and put into foster care." Kakashi's shirt was released by Naruto. "You're the reason I ended up dealing with a bunch of asshole foster parents. For fuck's sake, I spent half my life being beaten by them and the other half begging them for food. I just figured that your life would be better without me in it, Kakashi said in an attempt to calm them down. My life would have been better if I'd had someone looking after me, Naruto said, his hands trembling. There was nothing Kakashi could say. As he turned to go, Naruto yelled, "You son of a bitch. You ruined my life." At him. The end of the flashback. Kakashi has never experienced a worse night in his life. After being beaten up that night, he informed Rin the truth about what had transpired, and she subsequently told Jiraiya as well. She obviously stopped asking him out after that. To get the blonde to even speak to Naruto again, Kakashi had to assist him in launching the Nine Kings. Before the two would truly become friends, another year passed. 4 years later, Rin was speaking to him once more. All he could do was hope that nothing would happen to ruin his life once more. Kakashi had been trying his hardest to do everything correctly, all he could do now was hope that it would be sufficient. For a young, dark-haired man named Zaku, the night had been lonely. He was trying to drink himself to insanity while sitting by himself in a bar. After learning that he had fucked one of the strippers at his bachelor celebration, his finance kin had thrown him out 2 nights prior. The fact that he had slapped her on his way out didn't help. The bartender, who made sure his glass was always full with brandy on the rocks, was his sole friend at the moment. You get drunk and fuck one piece of strange and all of a sudden you're the devil, he said, sighing as he finished another glass. I tell ya man, women. Would you feel the same way if she'd been the one who cheated on you? A brown-haired young man asked as he sat down next to him. Hey, I can keep my woman happy and in line. Who do you think you are anyways? Butting into my business, Zaku sarcastically replied. The man with the brown hair introduced himself as Kankuro and took out his wallet. I'm just a guy who wanted someone to talk to, he continued. Well, why don't you go and fuck off? All you're going to do is kill my buzz, said Zaku, who couldn't care less about conversation. After removing a $50 bill and placing it on the counter, Kankuro said, if it's okay with you, I was hoping to help your buzz. I guess a little company couldn't hurt. So what did you want to talk about? Zaku said after having a sudden change of heart. When his phone rang, Kankuro began to take it out of his pocket and said, well, both of us seem to enjoy the company of beautiful women. I suppose that would be something we could talk about. The bartender refilled Zaku's glass and said, beautiful women just so happen to be my favorite topic. Do you get a ton of pussy? Back before I got a fiancé I did. Kankuro added, I did okay for myself, but I've got a serious girlfriend now, and then he hit the, damn it, button on his phone. Giving Kankuro a moment to put something in his drink, Zaku leaned down to pick it up and said, I'll get that for you. You'd better be careful or you're gonna bust this thing. Zaku handed Kankuro the phone and said, yeah, I wouldn't want to have to replace this thing. Looks like I got a text from my girlfriend. She wants me to go see a movie with her. Kankuro had to suppress a smile. It was painful for Zaku to watch the man who was covering his beverages say, but you just got here man. After waiting for Zaku to finish his drink, Kankuro remarked, oh well, what you gonna do? Just keep the 50, I'll buy your drinks for the night. Zaku had no intention of disputing that. Well shit man, thanks. Don't worry about it, you're obviously having a rough day, so drink that brandy like it's your last, said Kankuro as he began to leave the bar. After leaving the bar, Kankuro called his brother and said, Higara, it's your bro. Zaku's gonna be dead before the morning's up. The herbs I used will make it look like he died of alcohol poisoning and the coroner won't be able to tell there was any foul play. Gaara always made sure to say, nice job Kankuro. Kin was willing to pay a king's ransom to see that bastard get what was coming to him. He took great pride in his brother's skills. Now that he had to pose the difficult question, so did you or any of the other kings figure out who the traitor was? Kankuro was relieved that he could provide Gaara with some positive news. No, none of them found even the slightest indication that anyone who works for them was the traitor. Gaara fervently hoped he could respond, no, most of the kings didn't even mention Han's painting to anyone. Well that sucks, is there any chance that one of them could be lying? Kankuro said, wishing that this situation would end quickly. That was already investigated by Gaara, who said, I had Tamari do some snooping around. All of the kings did exactly what Naruto asked them to do. This whole situation was getting so difficult that Kankuro detested it, saying, Naruto better find this guy fast. Lord knows how long we've got before he moves on from Han and starts attacking the other kings. Just be patient and have faith in Naruto. I'm sure he'll figure out who our oppressor is soon. I've gotta go Konkuro, but just sit tight for now. Gaara was afraid of the same thing. Alright, I'll wait and see who's next on this guy's hit list. Good luck to that poor sap, Konkuro muttered as he hung up the phone. When Naruto texted Yagura and accused his guys of betraying him, Yagura was pretty incensed. But none of the 9 kings were stupid enough to betray Naruto. That would ultimately result in someone dying. Yagura examined every individual in his organization who might have knowledge that could be used against Han, despite his aversion to the task. As he had anticipated, none of them was the traitor. Yagura will give Naruto a hard time when he sees him again. In his office at the moment, the king of falsified documents was considering how he would deal with all of the problems he was now dealing with. He continued to believe that Han was attempting to defraud the other kings. Yagura didn't think any traitors or doctors were interfering with the 9 kings' affairs. No, it was simply Naruto being overly trusting and Han being a fool. It would take something significant to make Yagura reconsider this, and as luck would have it, a significant event was on the horizon. Kisame and Zabuza went inside the office after knocking on the door. With an air of nervousness, Zabuza said, Yagura. We've got a bit of a problem. Yagura was grumbling, oh great, another fucking thing to worry about. Well, lay it on me. What the hell is it now? With a few papers in hand, Kisame said to Yagura, well sir, the bank just sent us a few papers to confirm some transactions you were supposed to have made. After examining the document, Yagura said, I never made any of these withdrawals. Not a single one of them. Zabuza was already aware of it. Well yeah, I kind of figured that out already. With all the various withdrawals, this guy took out a total of $304,562. What? Yagura almost had a heart attack at hearing that. Now just calm down man, Kisame said, having never witnessed Yagura so irate. Calm down, I just lost over $300,000, said Yagura. Look, in a situation like this, we've gotta make sure we're thinking straight, Zabuza said, unsure of how to respond. How did they do it? How did these sons of bitches manage to get that much of my money? Yagura continued to yell. It was difficult for Kisame to say to him, hee, you're not gonna believe this. Glaring at him, Yagura said, try me. He sighed, well sir, they got into your account by using falsified documents. Falsified documents, they used my own skill against me to steal my hard-earned cash. Yagura's angry gaze began to flicker. Zabuza was growing increasingly frightened of his superiors. As much as I'd love to sugarcoat it, that's pretty much exactly what happened. This guy had a bunch of documentation that let him get into your account. He was smart enough to go to the banks where you'd never been seen in person too. Yagura couldn't comprehend. The only person who could make a fake document good enough to do something like this is me. I can't think of anyone else that would even be able to come close to pulling this off. Kisame had been contemplating that. You've got a point, but is there any chance that someone could take an old document you falsified and mess with it so that it can be used against you? After a brief moment of reflection, Yagura said, well, it's not a complete impossibility. They'd need to have a lot of business experience to know how to make the right changes though. Hey, do you think that this could be the same guy that's messing with Han? Zabuza had to ask. Yagura wasn't aware of that. A doctor just might have business knowledge to figure something like this out, or he may at least know the right people to do it for him. So does that mean that you believe Han? Do you think that there really is someone coming after the kings? Kisame asked, unsure of whether to say this or not. As much as I dislike the taste of crow, this does make it seem like Han was telling the truth, Yagura said, hating to acknowledge it. What the hell does the taste of crow have to do with anything? Asked Kisame. With a humorous expression, Zabuza asked his buddy, really? That's what you got out of that sentence? Yagura was no longer even bothered by such things, saying, it just means that I'm admitting I'm wrong Kisame. Feeling a little foolish, Kisame asked, oh, well why didn't you just say that? For the love of God, will you two just leave so that I can call Naruto? Yagura said, slapping his forehead. Seeing that it was time to leave, Kisame and Zabuza said, of course sir, just call us if you need us. I swear, if those two weren't so good at killing people, Yagura groaned as he pulled out his phone. When Naruto received the call for Yagura, he was in bed, and for a few reasons, he was quite pleased about it. In the first place, this demonstrated that Han was telling the truth and that the kings were actually being challenged. Secondly, This proved to be a fairly good starting point. Now they just needed to identify which of Yagura's customers was the issue. Yagura was far less pleased with all of this. He was solely concerned with the fact that he had lost a huge sum of money. Yagura was told by Naruto that he would do everything in his power to return his money, but until then, he would need to be extremely frugal with what little money he had left. Even though Kakuzu was Fu's friend, he wouldn't give him a break, so he might have to go see him. Naruto was speaking to his assistant Hinata Hyuga in the rear of his restaurant, where he conducted all of his dubious operations, just a few hours after the call. Hinata was the heir to Byakugan Investments, a business that bought and sold shares of different firms using its expertise in the stock market. They were the second largest company in Konoha for a long time, but now that United Sharingan Defense was failing, they were the dominant force. At the time, Hinata was working her way through college, managing Naruto's restaurant and a few other enterprises to get experience and some cash. Whenever Naruto was in the restaurant, she made sure to be there. Hinata was unable to control her feelings for Fu, even though she was aware of Naruto's obsession with him. Despite being a criminal, Naruto was a wonderful man. In fact, Hinata was aware that Naruto was the leader of the 9 kings and that he was a criminal. Hinata had spent enough time examining Naruto's financial situation to determine that he was receiving more money than he ought to. He must have been laundering money since no small-town eatery could have done this well. When she began working for a few of his pals and discovered they were doing the same thing, it became even more obvious. Naruto didn't even try to deny it when Hinata finally found the strength to confront him about it. He even gave her the whole truth about how he actually earned the majority of his income. Hinata simply couldn't bring herself to send him in, therefore Naruto was correct when he said that she was too smart to do something as stupid as ratting on him. As he explained his strategy to Hinata, Naruto said, "The first thing I did was have Yagura take all of the money out of his accounts so that this guy can't get to it again. We don't want him to lose any more of his money than he already has, now do we?" Made sense, and Hinata understood it. Naruto was moving around a bit. "No, we don't. So now that I've got that done, I'm gonna have my guys find the bank's tellers who handled the transactions. There's no guarantee that they'll remember the guy or that he handled all this stuff himself, but it's worth a shot." "So what if that doesn't work and you still can't find him?" Hinata asked him straightforwardly. Naruto was truly hoping it didn't happen. "Then we're gonna have to go through almost every single person that Yagura's ever sold a fake document to, just to see what we can find. For all we know, this guy could have bought those damn papers years ago, so even that is a long shot." "You seem awfully excited about this so-called long shot. Why are you so happy if we've got so little to work with?" Hinata said, expressing dissatisfaction with their odds. "A little is all I'm gonna need with the team I've got," Naruto replied with assurance. "If I tell them to do everything I just told you about, I'm positive they'll at least be able to give me something I can work with." "So the heir you going to call the kings now?" Hinata asked, acknowledging that Naruto's team was extremely strong. Naruto thought it was premature. "No, I need to think it through a little bit more. The plan isn't perfected enough for me to bet the lives of those I care about on it." The thought of, "Yes, you need to make sure your lover is safe, don't you?" made Hinata frown a little. Naruto said, "Come on Hinata. You know that I care about you too. The two of us would just never have worked out." Naruto was aware of Hinata's affections for him. It was a phrase Hinata had heard far too often. "I'm not an idiot, Naruto. I know that Fu is prettier than I am and that you don't find me attractive." Naruto wouldn't allow her to believe that. "What the hell are you talking about, Hinata? You're one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. Don't get me wrong, for me Fu will always be the most gorgeous girl in the world, but you're amazing too. Not to be rude here, but you've got some of the best tits and one of the nicest asses I've ever seen. Top that off with a pretty face and you've got yourself one hell of a woman." When he mentioned her, Hinata flushed and said, "Oh, thank you Naruto. That's very sweet." Naruto smiled with her teeth. "Don't mention it. By the way, could you not tell Fu about everything I just said? She'd kick my ass for saying stuff like that." "Don't worry Naruto, it'll be our little secret. Of course I'll have to get a raise in my paycheck at the end of the week," hinted Hinata, implying that she could do that. "You're smart, funny, and beautiful. Trust me, Hinata, you're going to attract a great guy one of these days." "He's just not gonna be me," Naruto said, laughing as he placed his hand on her shoulder. Hinata wrote, "You're a really nice guy Naruto, even if HWAT you do is considered a crime." She was both proud and sad. I have my moments. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got some friends to go and see, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. It made Hinata very sad to see him leave. Why was Naruto unable to remain single when he was such a decent guy? Well, she felt in her heart that Naruto was correct and that she had to let go. She would have to find her own man because Fu and Naruto were not going to split up anytime soon. It might even be another king, but who could tell? When Naruto called Kakashi and informed him of the new lead he had obtained on the enigmatic doctor, Kakashi almost leapt with excitement. It was wonderful to have something tangible to base oneself on after being completely lost for so long. As soon as he could, he grabbed Rin, and they immediately set out to go to the nearest bank where one of the withdrawals had been made. In the car, Rin briefly spoke with Kakashi, primarily to thank him for his assistance with Naruto, and the two detectives made it to the bank in a flash. The parking lot was nearly vacant, and the space was somewhat narrow. Despite his skepticism, Kakashi maintained his optimism that the location would have security cameras. When Kakashi and Rin entered the bank, they discovered that the exterior didn't match the interior. The bank's interior looked pretty upscale, and it was obviously very secure. With vaults and soldiers around, it appeared to be a miniature castle. The fact that Yagura kept his money in this manner didn't surprise Kakashi in any way. Although it was not well known, it was nevertheless extremely safe. It really doesn't surprise me that this is the kind of place where Yagura keeps his money, Rin replied to Kakashi. Rin understood what he was saying. Yeah, this place is perfect for him. Completely under the radar, but still very safe. He can hide a lot of money without too many eyes looking at it. Excuse me, ma'am. This is Detective Hitaki and this is Detective Nohara. We're with the Konoha Police Department and we were wondering if we could ask you a few quick questions about a transaction that occurred here a couple of days ago. Kakashi said, nodding and approaching the teller while displaying his badge. Like most bank tellers, the woman grinned brightly at him and said, "Of course, as long as it doesn't involve any privileged information, you can ask anything you like." A pleasant greeting was part of her training. Rin asked, "Is there any chance you remember a man by the name of Yagura stopping in here?" But she was unable to perceive privileged information as an issue. The woman laughed. "Of course I remember him. His coming in was a bit of an event actually. Despite how much cash he keeps here, we've never had the pleasure of seeing him in person. Is there any chance that you could describe the man to us? Hair color, height, stuff like that?" asked Kakashi, a little excited. The woman paused for a moment. "Well, he was about average height, had shortish white hair, and he was kind of skinny. Oh yeah, and he had these huge round glasses too. Sounds like a pretty hard guy to miss. Now, do you guys have security cameras that saw the guy coming and going?" Rin asked, unable to believe that a man of that caliber should be too difficult to locate. The lady looked apologetic and said, "Sorry, our security tapes are erased every 24 hours so that we can record new ones. Recording a full day of footage takes up a lot of memory, so we only bother to save it if anything really unusual happens." "Fair enough. I suppose your description will be enough. Thanks for your help." Kakashi couldn't really criticize them there. "Not a problem, detective, have a nice day." The woman waved them off. As Rin and Kakashi left, Rin grinned slightly and said, "Well, that was easy. I mean, there's no way that Yagura would forget someone like that." She was reminded by Kakashi, "That's assuming that whoever it is that's after the kings actually went in there himself. He could have sent someone else." Rin remained upbeat, saying, "Well, he should be an easy guy to track down either way. The guy sounded pretty conspicuous looking." She may agree with Kakashi on that, saying, "Yeah, let's go see if Yagura remembers anyone like that." Madara was preparing the next stage of his scheme while the investigators were busy following up on their leads. Naturally, it was him who altered the documents Orochimaru had used to defraud Yagura. The old man only needed to locate the paper that Yagura had given him years prior and make a few minor adjustments. Madara found them easy to understand, but no one else would have found them that easy. He needed to connect with his family now that he had the kings scurrying around like headless chickens. Madara didn't want to appear foolish, so he had to be sure that this strategy had a real chance of succeeding before he told anyone about it. When he was certain, he summoned his great-grandson Sasuke and Itachi as well as his grandson Obito, who probably wouldn't be interested. Fukagu's sons, Sasuke and Itachi, had lost both of their parents when they were young, as their father had murdered their mother before killing himself. It couldn't have been better than managing their family business, but Madara didn't know what the two of them did for a living. Madara was aware that Obito was a professional criminal, but he presented himself as a private investigator. The man earned money by performing tasks that others lacked the courage to perform on their own. Because of his background as a police officer, he was also quite skilled at avoiding detection. Right now, he had the three of them in front of his bed. They all shared Madara's dark hair and eyes, and they were all dressed nicely to avoid upsetting their grandfather. Their looks and hair were the only true indicators of their differences. Obito had mid-length hair and a slightly plumper face than Sasuke. Itachi had a thin face and long hair, and Sasuke was slightly plumper and had shorter, less tidier hair. Madara said, "Hello you three. It's good to finally see you again. I do hope you all have an active interest in saving our company." She was happy that everyone had shown there. Obito asked rather cynically, "Why in the hell did you make all of us take time out of our lives to talk about a company that's already dead?" Since he truly didn't want to be here. Madara grumbled as he said, "I see you still have no respect for the company your ancestors built, Obito. Do you even care about everything they sacrificed to build this great empire?" "To be fair, grandfather, the company's days are numbered. It seems their sacrifices may have been in vain," Itachi said him. He was the family's current sane voice and the older of the two brothers. As his grandson put it, "You have a valid point there. However, I have found the solution. I've found something that will undoubtedly save this company and make sure that it's always provided for." Madara felt a little silly. This statement was difficult for Sasuke, the younger and more impetuous of the brothers, to accept. "I think the company is a little too far gone at this point. Let's face it, Grandpa, it's time to cut our losses and move on." Madara gave his great-grandson the most ominous look and "Bite your tongue, you brat. This company won't be dying now or anytime soon, because what I've got is foolproof. We're going to take over one of the greatest criminal organizations the world has ever seen. We're about to have complete control of the 9 kings of crime, and once we have it, one of you can take over as CEO of the company and we'll launder the money we make from the 9 kings into the United Sharingan Defense." Obito was about to giggle. "You must be joking. Grandpa, we don't have even close to enough power to take those guys. What are you gonna do, use our old factories to supply an army?" As he put it, "Not every plan requires guns or knives. I've already begun to set everything in motion. For the past week or so, with the help of a friend, I've been strategically ruining the king's operations." Madara was shocked by his grandchildren's lack of faith in him. He now had interests related to Itachi. "I see. That does change things slightly, I'll admit. However, I'm already running a business conning old fools out of their cash. For Pete's sake, I make $80,000 a month, nearly $1 million a year, and that's a minimum. Why should I risk that on something that's not even a sure thing?" Madara disagreed with his reasoning. "$1 million a year, that's nothing compared to what I'm offering. You've got a chance to be one of the richest men in the world once it's all said and done. You can't be telling me that you're gonna pass that up." "While that is a good point, I'm still just not sure," Itachi said, scratching his chin. "I think that Itachi's right. I'm making more than enough cash right now and I'm safe doing it. Why join the high mortality rate world of the 9 kings if we don't have to?" said Sasuke, who was beginning to appear more anxious than the others. Madara said, "You're sounding a little bit nervous here. Surely you could always use more money, Sasuke. What do you do for a living anyways?" Because she thought Sasuke was coming off as a little desperate. "Officially I'm a private investigator," Sasuke laughed out loud, "but of course that's bullshit. Basically, I'm a very special kind of fixer for very wealthy criminals. People pay me a very high price because of how high risk the kind of things I fix are. The kind of stuff I do, you can't hand off to some kind of third-rate criminal. Now this is a skill that will come in handy. I'm assuming of course that you are with me on this, right Sasuke?" Madara was delighted to learn this. Itachi saved Sasuke's bacon by saying, "I think I speak for all three of us when I say that we need time to think. This isn't something that we can decide on the fly, grandfather." Madara opened his lips to protest, then closed it again. It might have been wiser to simply allow them to do this voluntarily. Not that any of the three would object. To ensure their safety, Madara told them, "For the record, none of you will be at any real risk during this plan. I've seen to it that another person will be blamed for all of it. What if the kings figure out who the guy is and interrogate him until he blabs on you? They'll come after you and fill your decrypted ass with bullets," Obito thought, feeling the need to ask more questions. Madara had prepared far in advance for that issue. I've gained enough information to bury the 9 kings. You have no idea what all I had to go through to get information. I had to sell and spend so much just to obtain some of it, but it was worth it in the end. If I die before this plan is complete, my assistant will open my personal safe and give this information to the police. I'd rather they die with me than live once I'm gone. Sasuke's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his thoughts to himself. We'll take that into consideration. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got to go and meet up with an old friend. That's too bad. What about you guys, Obito and Itachi? Will you stay with this old man for a little while longer? Madara said, with a somewhat disheartened expression. Sorry, but I'm afraid I have business to attend to as well. Obito didn't want to spend any more time with the man than necessary. Have a pleasant day though. Feeling a little bad, Itachi remarked, I guess I could stay for half an hour, but I do have things I need to do today. With a hint of annoyance, Madara remarked, nice to see one of you still has time for me. You two are free to go I suppose. Sasuke and Obito both wanted to return with a clever comment, but they had other things to do. They exited Madara's bedroom after giving Itachi a slight nod. Before I make this call, let me just say that there's no way in hell I'd ever work for that senile old bag of wind, Sasuke said to Obito as soon as they were out of Madara's hearing range. Obito soon said, same here. That guy's a real piece of work. I've never seen someone that greedy and egotistical. Placing the phone to his ear, Sasuke said, tell me about it. Who are you calling anyways? Obito asked out of curiosity. The phone was ringing, and Sasuke could hear it. For your own safety, don't ask. Obito knew that Sasuke's caller would probably complicate matters, but he wasn't going to pry into his cousin's affairs. Well, if you say so. Just remember, you can always call me if you need help, Obito said. Before the individual he was phoning answered, Sasuke gave him a slight nod. Hello. Hey Naruto, it's Sasuke. Something very big just came up. You and I need to meet up like right now. Sasuke expressed his satisfaction at being picked up so quickly. All of this startled Naruto a lot. Well, I guess that we up at my restaurant if you'd like. He asked. Sasuke said, I think it'd be better if we just met up at my house. Do you know where it is? Because he didn't like the way that sounded. Naruto had a way to get there. Well yeah, I sent you those checks last year. It would have been kind of hard to do that if I didn't have your address. Oh yeah, so you'll come then. Sasuke had nearly forgotten. With little other option, Naruto said, sure, I can be there in just about 20 minutes. After giving that some thought, Sasuke said, you might just beat me there then. Just tell Sakura you're there to see Sasuke and she'll let you in. Naruto had not heard that name in a long time. Sakura, huh? How do you think she'll react to seeing me again? He asked. You know, I really don't think I could tell you, Sasuke replied with sincerity. When's the last time you two saw each other? Naruto had no idea. I can't remember, but I know that it's been a long time. At least 6 years. You'd better call Sakura and tell her I'm coming. That seemed like a really excellent plan to Sasuke, who said, in that case I'll let you go so that I can call her. I'll see you in like half an hour. Naruto hung up after saying goodbye briefly. Sasuke then pressed his speed dial to begin his next crucial call. He was eager to watch how everything played out. Now that they were back with Kakashi and Rin, things had started to go their way. Yagura didn't even need to consider who the man who had made the transactions was because she had heard the description. Kabuto Yakushi, a medical student at the hospital where Yagura had received some X-rays a few months prior, was the only person he could think of who suited that description. No one else matched the description, therefore it didn't really matter that he had never sold documents to Kabuto before. This was a difficult man to forget, as Rin had said before. The detectives immediately began investigating the true identity of this Kabuto persona after hearing this. Finding out that something wasn't right with him didn't require much investigation. He nearly worshipped a doctor named Orochimaru, according to everyone they asked him about in the hospital. Simply hang out with Orochimaru, and Kabuto will eventually appear if you ever want to locate him. Orochimaru didn't exactly seem normal either. According to a number of others, the man terrified them to no end. The situation became much more bizarre when they examined him. His credit card statement showed that he had made numerous purchases for medical supplies that he had on hand. What sort of physician need medical supplies at home? Even still, there wasn't actually a smoking gun anywhere, even though everything was odd. Although there was no way to confirm it just yet, it appeared that Orochimaru might have asked Kabuto to go to the bank on his behalf. Until they asked Naruto what he wanted to do, Kakashi and Rin decided that they shouldn't call Kabuto in just yet. When they were ready, they would call Naruto after organizing their affairs. There was a chance that Orochimaru might be the man they were searching for, but it was a slim one. A pleasant park was only a few blocks away from Sasuke Uchiha's modest brown home, which was surrounded by a white picket fence and had flowers on the front. It looked like it was straight out of a magazine, the ideal setting for raising kids. One day, Sakura Haruno hoped to have children in the home. For her, life was like a fantasy once she married Sasuke at the age of 19. Sakura worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital and did a respectable job. However, the striking neon pink color of her hair confused most of her patients. Her hue was natural, much like Fu's, yet few anyone took her seriously. In Konoha, you wouldn't find many happy women. Sometimes she thought she was living in a fairy tale. She had the day off because it was the weekend. Given that Sasuke had a friend visiting today, that was very practical. She could now prepare lunch for everyone. She was attempting to stay comfortable by only dressing in pants and a basic red t-shirt. Sakura heard a tap on the door as she chopped some carrots and added them to the salad she was preparing. Naturally, she hurried to go grab it because she didn't want Sasuke's pal to have to wait. With a blonde man waiting for her, Sakura said, "Hi, you must be Naruto. It's very nice to meet you." Her cheerfulness made Naruto jump a little. Yeah, I'm Naruto. Do you not remember me or something?" he said. "Well, you do look pretty familiar," Sakura acknowledged, "but Sasuke said that you were a friend of his, so maybe the two of us met at a party." She truly didn't remember him, which shocked Naruto. Trying not to giggle, he said, "Yup, it was that party you guys had a while back." "Well, what are you waiting on? The two of us can wait for Sasuke together," Sakura said with a charming smile before gesturing for him to enter. "Sasuke is not going to believe this," Naruto muttered as he followed her inside. Naruto dragged Sasuke into the hallway as soon as he arrived home and informed him that Sakura had forgotten about him. Sasuke's jaw was close to breaking. "You're kidding me, right? For God's sake, you chased after her all throughout high school and she actually slapped you when you asked her to prom. She doesn't even know who you are. I guess the 6 years that she hasn't seen me in must have fogged her memory. She just thinks I am another one of your friends," Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. "She's a dumb bitch," said Sasuke, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're the one who married her. I would have thought you'd know that already," Naruto simply had to say. Sasuke knew that was the case. "She was the perfect woman to make my wife. That pretty little idiot will believe anything I say as long as she gets to keep living her fantasy life. People are a lot less likely to suspect someone's a cold-blooded killer if he's a family man." "Well, then we better go eat that lunch she made and act like nothing's up. We can talk after we get some food," said Naruto. Sasuke followed his pal to retrieve the supper his wife had prepared because he knew Naruto was correct. If he wanted to continue his actions without being discovered, he had to maintain this masquerade, as Naruto stated. Considering everything Sasuke had fixed, he had no desire to be caught. The three of them enjoyed a good supper and lots of friendly chatter. When Sakura asked Naruto how he knew Sasuke, Naruto simply said that he was Sasuke's client and not totally a lie, really. When Naruto inquired about how she and Sasuke had met, Sakura responded with a fanciful story about how, after graduating from high school, she was enchanted by her wonderful and considerate spouse. For the most part, Sasuke sat there in silence, wanting to laugh at how bizarre the entire exchange was. After they had all finished their salad and soup, Sakura went off to do some errands. She told Sakura how much she had loved Naruto's company and expressed her hope to see him again before leaving. The two companions started laughing when she left. Naruto bellowed, "Oh man, that was just hilarious." In a traditional manner. 4 years of hating your guts or spitting on your feet and then she just forgets who you are. "Oh man, that's priceless," was Sasuke's reaction, which was nearly identical. "Before we start, I just have to ask, you know that you can trust me, right?" Sasuke said to Naruto after they had stopped laughing and explained why he had seen him. The query shocked Naruto. "You were one of my only friends in high school and you've been my extreme issue fixer since I started the Nine Kings. You've been my best friend for the past 10 years. Of course I trust you." Sasuke knew he could begin as soon as he heard that. His friend's survival rested on him remembering what his grandfather had taught him. As the narrative progressed, Naruto's eyes continued to enlarge. It sounded like Naruto was trapped in a terrible dream from which he was unable to awaken. From the look on Naruto's face, Sasuke could tell how anxious he was, and that's about it. Basically Madara's got you all by the short hairs right now. With 1,000 ideas racing through his head, Naruto asked himself, is there any chance he's bluffing? I mean, he could say he had the information so that you and your family would work with him, but he might really not have anything. That's a possibility, but is it a risk you're willing to take? How much information do you think it would take to finish off you and your friends? Sasuke said, tapping his finger nervously on the desk. Naruto took a breath, not much. If Yamato smells blood in the water, he's going for the kill. Even the slightest bit of information on us might just get Yamato what he needs to tear our operation a new one. Sasuke expressed his sympathy for the man by saying, so what are you gonna do? You can't just kill Madara, at least not until you find and destroy that information he had. Naruto remarked, oh man, this better be some good fucking news, as his phone began to ring. This is really going to take some time to figure out. The call didn't last long, but Naruto answered it. After paying close attention to the other person's words, he said, don't do a damn thing about it, Kakashi. Get all of the kings at Choji's place right now and wait for me to get there. Just tell them that we've got a major break in the case and that it's very important that we all get together. I've got nothing else to say right now, so I'll call you later. So you're gonna warn all of them about Madara, good plan. What else? Sasuke questioned after Naruto hung up. Naruto took out his coat and said, fuck if no. I'm just gonna wing this whole thing for now until I can think of something better. Knowing you, you'll pull some crazy ass plan out of nowhere and fix all of this, Sasuke said, standing up and placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder. I'm pure raw chaos and I've got my sights set on him, Naruto said with a sly smile in response to the compliment. Madara doesn't know what's coming for him. When Naruto called, the kings were all very excited to see what he had to say and hurried to Choji's restaurant. When they all entered, Naruto, Kakashi, and a woman with dark hair were already there. He appeared to be quite absorbed in his thoughts and was constantly murmuring to himself. Fu was the only king he truly saw entering, and not just because she was stunning as usual. She was carrying a cage with a small blanket over it. Fu, what's in the cage? Naruto asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Just a little something I need to drop off once we're done here. The little guy's sleeping right now, so he won't make too much noise during the meeting, Fu said as she settled into her seat and put the cage down as well. Naruto simply assumed everything was going as usual and turned to see that all of the kings had now arrived. Alright people, listen carefully, I've got a lot to tell you. We've found out a lot of shit, and most of it is gonna surprise you, he said after taking a long breath. I don't care about what you've found out, I just want my damn money back. Yagura said, unconcerned by any of that nonsense. So were you able to figure out who took it or not? The first inquiry should have been, yeah Yagura, we've figured out who it was. The only problem is we can't touch a fucking hair on his head. Naruto should have known that. The question, who in the hell has so many connections that even we can't touch him? Quickly piqued Gaara's curiosity. When Naruto remarked, the ex-head of United Sharingan Defense, Madara Uchiha. He's the one who's been screwing around with our business, he didn't think anyone would believe him. Yugito was about to faint. Whoa, hold on a second. Why the hell would Madara Uchiha do something like this? He's rich as all hell, he always has been. I know that his company's dying, but he could just sell off all of his old equipment and factories. If he did that he could pay off all of his debts and still have a ton of cash left over. In response to that question, Kakashi had spent enough time with Uchihas to say, yeah, but then his company would just fade into the dust. He's not gonna let that happen. That's worse than death in Madara's mind. Okay, so Madara is the one after us. Why can't we just put a bullet in the crazy motherfucker's head and end it? Han said, not caring about that at the moment. If you'd all just listen to what I have to say, I'll tell you. Naruto wished that someone would allow him to speak. Madara paid hand over fist to get whatever information he could on us, or at least that's what he told my informant. Hold on a second, who's this informant that you're talking about and why should we trust him? Interrupted Utakata. Naruto gave Utakata a very menacing, I can't tell you his name and you should trust him because I do. Apparently I need to make something very clear right now. None of you, and I mean none of, you are to do or say anything about any of this to anyone. Killer Bee had to inquire, yo, why are you being secretive about all of this bro? Despite having faith in Naruto. With a sense of shame, Naruto said, because there's still a leak that we haven't plugged. We've got the jump on him right now, but if Madara finds out that we know, things will get a lot more complicated. Fu thought that Naruto was being honest, saying, come on guys, we know that we can trust Naruto. Sorry if we're not as easily swayed as you are. We're not all fucking his brains out, Roshi said, crossing his arms fiercely. He replied, do you have some kind of death wish, Roshi? I'm just asking because claiming that I'm manipulating Fu sure makes it seem like you have a death wish. Naruto appeared much more irate than Fu did. In an attempt to soothe Naruto, Fu said, don't be like that babe, you know Roshi's just nervous about all of this, just like you are. After hearing Fu's voice, Naruto groaned and said, if you say so, sweetie, but he better watch his damn mouth. No one insults you like that. At last, Rin said, ah, that's just plain romantic. Yeah, it romantic. Big freaking deal, am I gonna get my money back or not? Yagura said, growing even more irate. Han continued, and what about me? Am I gonna get a crack at this guy for messing with my operation? Naruto was aware of the reasonable inquiries. I already promised you Yagura, I'll make sure you get your money back one way or another. As for you Han, I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise you anything. You've gotta remember you're not the only one he screwed with. Plus, we've got to kill him in a way that it won't come back and bite us in the ass. When Han and Yagura heard that, they fell silent. They couldn't really expect much more. Naruto questioned the others, so do any of you have a question? Since he could tell they were both happy. They all looked around, waiting for someone to speak, but none did. They all seemed to understand Naruto's words, good, then all of you go home. I don't want you to say a word to anyone outside of this room about anything we just said. Seriously, no one at all. We can't risk Madara finding out. The kings nodded somewhat, but they still detested the thought that one of their employees might be the problem. Things were much more tricky now that they knew Madara had this information about them. Naruto's word was law, as always. All of the monarchs save Naruto and Fu stood up to depart because it was resolved and they all had somewhere to attend. Something shaking in the cage Fu had brought was audible to Naruto, who said, I think whatever's in that thing just woke up. Oh yeah, Fu said, peering beneath the cage, he's up all right. Perfect timing too. What have you got there? Said Naruto after hearing her open the cage and observing an orangish-red package being hauled out by Fu. I got you a present. Isn't he just the cutest thing? Fu said, pulling it all the way out to reveal a small fox who wasn't quite a kid but also wasn't quite an adult. So I guessing I'm the guy you had to drop him off to. I thought you said foxes were way too hard to train. Was Naruto's question in shock. He had asked her a year ago if she could use her connections to procure him a fox, and Fu could still recall that. I said they're extremely difficult to train, which they are. However, for you, I found a guy who was willing to do it. It was a little expensive, but I was glad to cough up the money to make my boyfriend happy. He had wanted one because he liked the Kyuubi so much. Naruto said to her, you know, that's the first time you've called me your boyfriend, as he cautiously reached down to pet the fox. The fox was a little uneasy, but it quickly yielded to Naruto's soft touches. Damn, I guess it is. Ah, whatever, we know what we mean to each other. Fu said with a startled expression. So do you like the fox? Oh yeah, I love him. Does he have a name yet? Naruto said, grinning down at his new pet. Fu reached for a few documents. His name is Kurama. You have to name them if you're gonna train them properly. These are all the licenses and whatnot that you need to have to own him legally. When Naruto remarked, Kurama huh? It's a good name. Seems to fit him. The fox glanced up and said, wow, you're pretty smart. You know your name and everything. Fu said, do you have a vet that knows how to handle fox stuff? After noticing how happy she had made Naruto. As he carefully hugged Kurama to his chest, Naruto said, my buddy Kiba and his family should be able to take good care of him if need be. After seeing the entire event with Rin, Kakashi had to ask, hey Fu, can you settle a bet for me? After giving the investigator a quick glance, Fu shrugged and said, sure, if I can anyways. I've got a buddy who swears up and down that if you pet foxes, they'll purr. That's bullshit, right? Was a question Kakashi had been dying to ask for years. Fu appeared to be annoyed. Ugh, how many times do I have to tell people? Foxes don't purr. That's something felines do, and foxes are much more closely related to canines. Anytime someone says a fox or anything related to a fox is purring, they're wrong. Thank you, Kakashi said. I can now tell Guy that for fuck's sake. While still clutching his new tiny friend, Naruto remarked, "That's great, Kakashi. However, I think Fu and I should probably get going. I need to get Kurama used to his new home, and I wanted her to come with me." Naruto's correct. I've got to take all the gear he needs for Kurama and teach him everything he needs to know about raising a fox, Fu said, scratching Kurama behind the ears. The question, isn't it just like raising a dog? Perplexed Rin. Fu was reflecting on everything she'd learned about foxes, sort of, but there's some key differences. The main one is how they're housebroken. Kurama's already trained, but there's something special Naruto has to know that Kurama's been taught to do when he has to use the bathroom. Don't want him peeing all over Naruto's apartment. That would pretty much suck. Naruto couldn't have agreed more. You'd better teach me that like the second we get home. Don't worry, I will. Do you want Kurama to ride in your car or in mine? Fu said, laughing and kissing Naruto on the cheek before kissing Kurama on the nose. Mine, of course. Kurama already knows you, but he still needs to learn who I am, answered Naruto hastily. Alright, I'll see you at your place then. Fu couldn't disagree with that. Turning to Kakashi and Rin, Naruto said, "Yup, we'll see at home." So what are you guys gonna do? As Fu began to depart. We're going to see Jiraiya to tell him everything we've found out. It's okay if we tell him, Rin felt was the best way to explain the situation. Yes, but make sure he understands that he shouldn't tell anyone else. In any case, his viewpoint is quite valuable, Naruto remarked as he walked away. With a curious expression on their faces, Kakashi and Rin watched Naruto depart with his new pet and lover, saying, only Naruto would go through all that just to get a fox for a pet. Kind of accustomed to it, Kakashi said, "Hey, as long as it's not anything that can kill him, I'm fine with it." Rin concluded that Kakashi was correct, saying, "All right. It would be wise for us to go find Jiraiya and inform him of our discovery. I'm prepared to wager that he would want to know." That was Kakashi's thought as well. It seems reasonable to me. Should I drive or do you want to? Quote. Rin said, "I'll do it," and removed the keys from Kakashi's pocket. In this manner, you can concentrate on a topic that we can discuss together. Rin was turning around, and Kakashi couldn't have been more pleased to see it. He began to smile beneath his mask. After the meeting, Gaara immediately went to work running his fictitious company, which he used to launder his hitman money. He pretended to sell real estate, specifically beachfront property, since it was a very simple business to do so. Before he began looking at the people he had on his hit list this week, he had a few things he wanted to accomplish with his fictitious company. He was a little taken aback when he entered the office because Hinata Hyuga was already there and taking care of some of his business. Gaara became apprehensive upon seeing her, but he simply continued in his typical monotone, "Ms. It's good to see you, Hyuga. I didn't believe you were supposed to be working with us today." "I wasn't actually," Hinata responded, going through some files. "Tamari called and said that you guys were really busy, so she asked me to come over and help. I was able to make it, but it required some rearranging of my other appointments." "Oh, she didn't need to do that," Gaara said, feeling a sudden wave of shame. "We could have survived without you, I'm sure." "Now, Gaara, don't go and act like we aren't swamped," Tamari said as she entered. "I'm really appreciative that Hinata has agreed to assist us because we have a lot of additional work to accomplish." Hinata smiled slightly at the blonde woman, saying, "I was glad to come and assist Tamari. It's not that I don't get paid properly by you guys." Gaara considered continuing his protest, but Tamari approached and drew him aside, murmuring, "Why would you go and say anything like that? I am aware that you desire her presence even more than I do." Tamari's willingness to get involved in his life was something Gaara both admired and detested. She had forced him to do things that were uncomfortable for him but that he frequently found enjoyable, but this was making him extremely anxious. "Why did you invite her here in the first place? Not much more work needs to be done on our end." "Gaara, you're crazy about that girl, for heaven's sake," Tamari said, rolling her eyes. "Whenever she enters the room, you give her a gaga look. And she's crazy about Naruto, Gaara retorted. With her, I have no chance. Naruto is already taken, and she knows it, Temari retorted. Simply ask her out. What could possibly go wrong? Quote, I don't know about this Tamaria, was one of the many terrible things that Gaara could see happening, but none of them seemed particularly likely. With a harsh voice, she gestured to Hinata and said, damn it Gaara, to talk to her already. When Gaara saw his sister was serious, he approached her hesitantly and said, so, Hinata, is it good if I call you that? Quote, it's Gaara, of course, Hinata said with a chuckle after giving him a strange look. I take it that we're friends. Quote, the statement, yes, we've become very close, haven't we, gave Gaara a bit more hope. Quote, he liked Hinata because she smiled at him and said, I know you're not exactly great with people, but once you let someone in, they see what a nice guy you are. At last, Gaara grinned and said, thank you, that's very sweet of you to say. Hinata had a reputation for being kind, saying, Gaara, I'm just being honest. Actually, I'm excited to see you every day. I feel the same way, Gaara said, feeling better and better. How long are you here for? Quote, just 5 or 10 more minutes, Hinata said, checking her watch. I hardly had time to see this place at all. So Hinata, I was wondering if, maybe you'd consider, maybe if you had the time, that you and I could. Well, I was thinking Uma, Gaara began to inquire, realizing he didn't have much time. What my brother is so eloquently trying to ask you, is if you'd like to go out on a date with him sometime. Temari couldn't stand to watch her brother look foolish. What she said, Gaara was relieved that Temari had gone to his help. The inquiry, you want to take me out on a date, obviously surprised Hinata a little. Why, quote, you're incredible, Hinata, Gaara said, deciding it would be best to be straightforward. Gaara flushed slightly, you have a gorgeous body, a long blue hair, a sweet face, and so many other things that make you beautiful. In addition to being one of the sharpest people I've ever met, you're also among the kindest. I really don't see what it could hurt, so I guess I'll say yes, Hinata said, unsure of what to say because she knew she would never have Naruto and found his words to be so wonderful and he was a genuinely nice guy. I would be delighted to go on a date with you whenever you have the time. Thank you, Hinata, that means a lot to me, Gaara said, feeling as though his heart had just performed a backflip. I'll take care of the details as quickly as possible. With a slight smile on his face, Gaara left the room, prompting Temari to inquire, how would you manage without me? Quote, even though the man was a full-fledged pervert, he had made multiple attempts to settle down and start a family, but it had never worked out for him. Of course, Minato had been like a son to him, but Minato was no longer here. Kakashi and Rin went to Jiraiya's place to check if he was home while Gaara was chasing after his dream girl. Because he had no family, Jiraiya was generally always at home, which was why Kakashi and Rin knocked on his door, much to their convenience, and he opened it after only 2 knocks. Rin, how nice of you to stop by. Why are you in this area of the forest? Quote, having to complain, Kakashi said, I'm here too. The rapid response from Jiraiya was, I saw you, I just don't care to reply. Rin responded, hey Jiraiya, we're actually here on Naruto's behalf, while Kakashi continued to complain. Do you mind if we enter? Quote, when it came to Naruto, Jiraiya's doors were always open. Come right in, she said. I'm glad to help Naruto with everything he needs. Knowing that Jiraiya would treat him badly, Kakashi said, I don't imagine you've forgiven me for the entire Naruto issue yet. Quote, what do you think? Jiraiya said in a phony upbeat voice. Slumping, Kakashi said, I've acknowledged that what I did was wrong. Come on, Jiraiya, at this time, even Rin has forgiven me. With a slightly amused expression, Jiraiya said to Rin, you really did forgive him. Quote, Rin simply shrugged and said, what can I say? The past cannot be changed, and Kakashi has made every effort to atone for his actions. I reasoned that I could try him at least. That's all I'm asking for Jiraiya, just a shot, Kakashi continued after Rin's statement. Just give me that, please. Quote, Jiraiya had to consider this. He reasoned that if Rin could do it, he could too. All right, but let's just be friends to begin with, he said. You must regain my friendship. The pressure was beginning to get to Kakashi, who said, you guys never make it easy on me, but okay. Jiraiya thought it would be best to end the small talk first. So, what's up with Naruto? He didn't have any good leads when I last spoke with him. Well, now we've got plenty of leads, but there's nothing we can do about them, Rin said with a dismayed expression. Well, you guys better tell me the whole thing, Jiraiya said, wondering how things could turn out that way. Let's begin by discussing how you might have leads that you are not permitted to pursue. First, Kakashi told him about Madara and all the things the old man was planning for the kings, and Jiraiya wasn't particularly shocked that Madara was the one responsible from what he had heard. He was a very arrogant and immoral mana, and then they told him about the information Madara claimed to have on all the kings, which also didn't surprise Jiraiya because Madara was wise enough to have insurance. Most of what they said didn't really catch Jiraiya off guard, until they began discussing Orochimaru. Hold on a minute, what was the name of the doctor you just mentioned? Jiraiya inquired hurriedly. His name was Orochimaru, Rin said, accustomed to Jiraiya's behavior. What's so important? He's just a jerk, isn't that right? Quote. If only that were true, Jiraiya said, leaning back in his chair and wearing a troubled expression. Was he a spooky-looking figure who resembled a human snake? Quote. That almost sounds like a direct quote from the people we talked to, said Kakashi, who didn't like how close he was. Are you acquainted with this man? Quote. I wish I could say no, but I know that crazy son of a bitch all too well, Jiraiya said, rubbing his eyes wearily. When I was a police captain, he was one of the coroners. Rin had never heard of this before. I assumed Tsunade was a coroner at the time. Quote. Ah, Tsunade, you sexy fucking fox, Jiraiya said, delighted to have an opportunity to bring up her subject once more. Tall, blonde, with a tear-jerking ass and a gorgeous set of natural tits that I believe were made by God himself. You didn't want to mess with her because she was powerful and intelligent as well. Kakashi was beginning to feel uneasy. Please, may we simply return to Orochimaru? Quote. He had gone a bit too far, as Jiraiya could tell. Hee, fine. There was no denying that the man was a true genius. He has an IQ of about 150 and a memory that is almost photographic. After a while, I began to suspect that he was manipulating autopsy findings to get money. I began investigating it, but Orochimaru soon realized my goal and departed to work at a hospital. Was never able to determine what he was buying with that extra money. Me and Kakashi have some theories, but something tells me you don't want to know, Rin said, looking a little pale. I think you're right, Jiraiya said, letting out a deep sigh at having to go back in time. I don't want to consider what Madara and Orochimaru might do to Naruto and the kings if they are collaborating. We must quickly put an end to these individuals. That's why we came to meet you, Kakashi said to him. Do you have any suggestions for what we should do next? Quote. Jiraiya was clueless for the first time in his life, saying, shit, I don't even know where to start. The one advantage we have is that we already have a man on the inside, but Madara also has one. He does make things more complicated, Rin said, almost forgetting about the traitor. If we must continue to tread carefully around our own people, we will struggle to accomplish anything. What ought we to do? Quote. Jiraiya was deliberating. I think that we can work around the spy, if we just keep being careful about only letting the kings know what's going on. What do you want us to do, Jiraiya? I hope this is the last time I have to ask. Kakashi inquired again. Although he wasn't positive if he had the ideal concept, Jiraiya had one that he believed would work. Madara must store all of the data he collected in one place. Madara might simply provide the information he's keeping hidden if we can just gain Sasuke's trust. Since Sasuke has never been one to hide his feelings, Rin questioned whether they should have that much faith in him. Do you think he can succeed? Quote. Even though Jiraiya had only seen Sasuke a few times, he still had faith in him, saying, I think Sasuke would do almost anything for Naruto because he cares about him so much. I have faith that Naruto will maintain self-control. Kakashi was satisfied, saying, Sasuke and his grandfather are scheduled to meet again tomorrow. I'll give him instructions over the phone right now, and then I'll call Naruto to give him the rundown. Since much of this plan was going to rely on Sasuke, Jiraiya could only sit back and wait for the time being. Talk about aggravating. Jiraiya hoped to God he was right because he didn't want to think about losing Naruto the way he had lost Minato. Given that Naruto was likely his closest friend and that he was currently in danger, Sasuke was extremely anxious at the moment. He hadn't heard from Naruto for a few hours, so he had no idea how the meeting went. How much more anxious could a man get? As he sat on his comfortable couch, he was nearly sitting on top of his phone, pleading for it to ring. At last, It did, and Sasuke answered it immediately, saying, "About fucking time you called me. Which word is Naruto?" Quote. The person on the other end chuckled slightly and said, "Actually, it's Kakashi, but I'll still be happy to fill you in on everything." "Yeah, nice to talk to you, blah blah, what's going on with Naruto?" said Sasuke, who didn't care who it was at this point. Quote. "Jesse Sasuke, you're sounding really stressed out," Kakashi said, kind of wanting to keep banging the man. "Perhaps you ought to go take a relaxing bath, light some candles, and unwind for a while." Sasuke barked at the other end of the line, "Tell me what I want to know or I swear I'll reach through this phone and rip out your brain so that I can just find the answer myself." "That's kind of physically impossible, but okay," said Kakashi, clearly enjoying himself. "This is what you missed during the meeting." When they reached the section about his deceiving Madara, Sasuke finally received the direct response, and you could feel his anxiety rising. "You want me to betray my grandfather?" Quote. "You either have to betray him or let Naruto be fed to the dogs," Kakashi said, sensing that this would be a bit of a sore area with him. "Although it's up to you, I believe I know what you'll decide." "There's no way I can turn my back on Naruto like that, even if Madara is my grandpa," Sasuke said, feeling a little sorry for taking so little time to respond. "He's crazy, and this time he's going too far. Hell, managing the 9 kings is not something I want to do. Literally, Naruto has the ideal setup. I would have to find people to fill the roles that each person has. I don't require that much money or that much anxiety." That statement, "Heavy lies the head that wears the crown," was completely understandable to Kakashi. Naruto made sure he wasn't under too much pressure because of this. If he had attempted to complete all of this on his own, he would have gone crazy long ago. "I just needed to let you know that. Be sure you're prepared for tomorrow's appointment with your granddad. You must gain his trust as soon as you can." Sasuke hurriedly responded, "Yeah, I'll make sure that it gets done," as he noticed his wife approaching. "When I've got things going, I'll give you a call. Now enjoy a pleasant evening." Sakura sat down beside him once he hung up. "Who was that, honey?" Quote. "Oh, just a client who wanted me to do a couple of things for him tomorrow," Sasuke said, dismissing the incident as insignificant. "Nothing significant." Sakura was obviously thrilled about something when she said, "Sasuke, I have some pretty exciting news. You will not believe it." Quote. "It sounds like it's something good," said Sasuke, unsure of what to anticipate. "What is it?" Quote. "I'm pregnant," Sakura said, placing her hands on her stomach. After a brief moment of disbelief, Sasuke was truly delighted, saying, "That's fantastic. Is it certain?" Quote. With a delighted nod, Sakura added, "Of course, I didn't want to tell you until I was sure." "So when did you find out about this?" Sasuke was really delighted about all of this. He had always wanted a child and he really did have feelings for Sakura, though he wasn't sure if it was love. Quote. Sakura continued to giggle, saying, "I purchased some tests at the shop because I was 2 weeks late for my period today. I put myself to the test 3 times as soon as I came home. Every one of them tested positive. I'm gonna be a daddy. You're gonna be a mommy. We're gonna be parentsa," was the constant thought that ran through Sasuke's head. "This is going to be so perfect," Sakura said, throwing her arms around Sasuke. "We will start a family. I'm just so delighted, Sasuke." Quote. Sasuke could grasp it, saying, "It's truly incredible. How far along are you?" Quote. "I'm a month along," Sakura had already deduced. "We will have a baby here in about 8 months. A person is developing inside of me. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" Sasuke said, placing his palm on her stomach. "I don't care, as long as they've got your eyes," Sakura replied, fixing her gaze intently on Sasuke's. Looking back, Sasuke's eyes were still dancing with pleasure. "Yeah, my eyes, oh crap, I almost forgot," he said. Quote. Sakura gave him a questioning glance and said, "What is it?" Quote. Sasuke had to come up with an explanation for the Madara incident. "My grandfather will require my assistance for the upcoming weeks. He needs my assistance with some other medical matters." Sakura said, "Oh, well, that's no big deal," and saw no reason to doubt that. "I'm not expecting the baby anytime soon. A few weeks won't make a difference." "I understand," Sasuke said, "but it will be a little annoying." Sakura had an idea. Do they believe this might be it for him? "He's rather old." Quote. Rather of expressing his hope, Sasuke stated, it's a clear possibility, and he's more than pretty old. For heaven's sake, the man is older than dirt. To be honest, I don't know him all that well. For me, it won't be a huge deal. I suppose you have a point there, said Sakura, who had never even met the man. Well, that isn't important at the moment. The fact that we will soon have our own little bundle of joy is what counts. Part of him wanted a little boy to carry on the family name and bond with, and part of him wanted a little girl to treat like a princess and frighten away guys from. Perhaps if he was lucky, he could have both. Sasuke agreed and let her cuddle up with him. This wasn't the ideal time to have a baby, but he really couldn't complain because he was getting what he had always wanted, a little baby to call his own. The fox had his tiny paws on the dashboard and was trying to see out the window the entire time, which made it look pretty adorable. Fu had really hit the mark with this gift, and Naruto and Fu returned to his apartment rather quickly, but only because Naruto didn't want Kurama to urinate in the car. When they arrived at the apartment, Naruto put Kurama down, and the bundle of red fur went right away to explore his new home. Naruto watched as Kurama's curious eyes scanned the tiny space, making sure to look in every corner. At last, the fox stopped moving and appeared to nod as though he approved of the place. Then he entered the living room and walked in small circles before lying down. The animal's intelligence quite pleased Naruto, who said, "Wow, he's a smart little bugger, isn't he?" Quote. Fu was already aware of that, the trainer chose him for that reason. Foxes can get one kit that is haphazardly smarter than the others, much like people can with their children. He was ideal for teaching because he was born much smarter than the typical fox. After giving it some thought, Naruto posed the inquiry, "Does he come if you call his name or anything like that?" Quote. This was one of the things she needed to teach Naruto, Fu recalled. "Oh yeah, he only didn't come before because you were already holding him and I was petting him. Say his name, go ahead." After giving his furry friend a quick glance, Naruto called out to him, "Come here Kurama." After yapping and looking up, the fox approached Naruto. "You see, I told that he'd do it." Fu knew he would arrive. Naruto said, "I trusted you. Kurama is gonna be a ton of fun." He wasn't shocked. Fu reached down and scooped him up. "Yeah, but there's a couple things that you've gotta know about him. Nothing scary, just little things about what he does and what he needs to do and stuff." Naruto made careful to pay close attention to everything Fu said since he genuinely wanted to ensure Kurama was raised correctly. As Fu stated, Naruto was capable of handling any situation. Kurama had particular foods he should be consuming and small activities he would undertake when he wanted to use the restroom. In essence, a fox, like this one, required a lot of upkeep. Foxes took a bit longer to show affection, but Naruto thought he could gain Kurama's trust rather quickly. Naruto quickly felt like he was getting the swing of it, but just to be safe, he had jotted down most of what Fu had said. "Huh, that's not so bad. So what do you think, Kurama? Do you wanna be a new part of my little family?" he said, reaching up to scratch Kurama's neck. Kurama began to adore Naruto's fingertips and offered a little yip. "I think that's a yes. So, am I part of your little family?" Fu asked, assuming it was a rather obvious response. "Do you really have to ask?" Naruto asked, blushing slightly. Fu was snuggling with Kurama. "Nope, I know right where I fit in. I'm gonna be over a lot more now so that Kurama can cuddle with mama." Fu said, "So if you're Kurama's new mama huh?" And Naruto understood. "Yup, you got a problem with that daddy." Fu winked at him. "Nope," Naruto said, leaning in to kiss her, "I think we're the perfect little fucked up family." When Kurama began to wriggle a little, Fu said, "I'm going to take him outside so that he can relieve himself. You should probably call your vet to make sure that he's got all the stuff he's gonna need to take care of a fox. Alright, do you have a leash for him or something like that?" Naruto would call his old friend even though he assumed Kiba would be able to take care of anything Kurama needed. "Of course, I'm gonna put him on this before I go. Don't want him wandering off. He's smart, but he's still a wild animal," Fu said, holding up a blue collar with a leash fastened to it. Naruto began to ring his phone, happy to hear that. Before Kiba answered, it rang for a bit. "Damn it Naruto, this better be good. Ino's wearing nothing but whipped cream right now," Kiba said. A little surprised, Naruto said, "Whipped cream huh? That's actually kind of tame for you guys." Kiba wasn't denying it. "We only get really kinky if we have days where we know we're not gonna do anything. For stuff like that, you've gotta be able to focus." Not really wanting to know, Naruto said, right. So I just wanted to call you and tell you that I got a new pet. A little fox named Kurama. He was quite intrigued by this, even though he had a somewhat nude girl in his bedroom. A fox, huh? Well, that's pretty cool, but why are you calling me about it? He asked. Unexpectedly, Naruto had to clarify, because I was hoping that you could be his personal vet. Kiba suddenly felt a bit dumb. Oh, right. Guess I'm just not used to you calling me for something other than killing people. I'm not actually a full-fledged vet yet, but I can handle a fox just fine until I am. They're exotic pets, but not really all that much more complicated than a dog. He would respond, well, thanks. I'll make sure to pay you extra for this, so don't worry about that, as Naruto anticipated. From a distance, Ino could be heard saying, "Oh Kiba, you better not be getting soft on me." That's great Naruto, but I've gotta go. A sexy girl covered in ice cream topping is waiting for me. Kiba moaned slightly. I swear, Kiba said, hanging up the phone as Naruto was about to respond, those two fuck like a couple of rabbits. A couple of very messed up, kinky little rabbits. Then, to inform Naruto that Fu had returned to the apartment, a small orange blur sprung up on the counter. Ah, don't be so hard on them. How about I remind you just how much fun we had the other night? Fu said, putting her arms around him before he could even speak. She then carefully slipped her fingers down to his groin. With delight, Naruto shivered and said, "Oh, you are one sneaky woman, and God bless you for it." She pulled out his big member and began unzipping his pants, saying, "Ah yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. Let's put his bad boy to some good use." It should have been obvious to Naruto not to try to outright disparage Fu. He began to suck on her neck and kiss her, beating her with his hands rather than his words. Oh good God, yes. Naruto heard Fu's breathing quicken as her thoughts began to wander. That's right, I know just how you like it, don't I? Naruto grinned triumphantly at Fu. Fu said, "Shut up you idiot," and drew Naruto close for another lengthy kiss. With their mouths firmly pressed together, Fu and Naruto began walking toward the bedroom. Unnoticed, Kurama was following them as they fell onto the bed. The astute young fox leapt onto one of the chairs in the room and observed his new parents as they started having love. The couple were completely unaware of the fox. They were too caught up in the moment's passion.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.